Chapter 11-13. Fang and Lin Yong really loved each other. When they walked out just now, they put their arms around each other's shoulders and called each other brother. Li checked the accounts for a while. When he walked out of the room again, he saw Lin Yong hanging on the tree by Fang. Fang's strength was beyond doubt, and others could not be envious of him at all. He was born with great strength. When his family conditions were not good, he only looked stronger than others. Later, when the material conditions kept up, he began to leave ordinary people far behind. Coupled with the training of second granduncle, even Li Yi did not dare to say that he could easily defeat him. His fists were too heavy and one punch could kill someone. Lin Yong only had some skills, but he could only be regarded as half a person in the martial arts world. Of course he was no match for Fang. "Li brothers, save me, save me." Lin Yong hung on the tree. Seeing Li Yi coming out, he seemed to see his savior. Li Yi glanced at Fang, and then Fang jumped on the tree reluctantly and put him down. In fact, Ruoqing's pregnancy was somewhat beyond their expectation. This time they came to the Qi Kingdom for one more important thing in addition to sightseeing: to unify the holy religion. Su Zheng was indeed a rare talent. In the later generations he would definitely be the leader of a multi-level marketing organization, a large-scale one, and the #1 target of the state to crack down and ban. Their doctrine had become to persuade people to do good, leading the so-called holy religion founded by Taoist nun to the right path. All the believers had the right to believe or not at any time. In essence, there was not much difference from the regular religions in the later generations. However, it was impossible for Su Zheng to complete this difficult task alone. No matter how high his status was, it was not higher than that of Taoist nun. Many things needed Ruoqing to do. Now that Ruoqing was pregnant, Li Yi naturally would not let her appear in public again. The matter of the holy religion was put aside for the time being. Along the way they collected a lot of news about the Qi Kingdom. The emperor of the Qi Kingdom had been ill for a long time and did not care about the state affairs. These years he had been ill several times and almost died, but in the end he did not die. If he died, it would be straightforward. The eldest prince Zhao Zheng was the legitimate crown prince. Before the emperor died, there was no edict to depose the crown prince. He would be the new emperor. The third prince Zhao Yi would have to go wherever he wanted. Unless he rebelled or Zhao Zheng suddenly became hysterical and passed the throne to him, he would have no fate with the throne in this life. However, as long as the old emperor did not die, Zhao Zheng was only the crown prince. If he reached out in advance, it would also be a rebellion. Therefore, the two people and the two forces were in a deadlock. However, the emperor of the Qi Kingdom not only let the eldest prince, Zhao Zheng, supervise the state, but also let the third prince, Zhao Yi, supervise from the side. It was not hard to imagine what the court of the Qi Kingdom would be like. Of course, there were benefits to doing this, and they were not small. The two forces were at odds with each other. Each was waiting to seize the other's weakness and mistake, so neither dared to make mistakes. When Li Yi left, the Qi Kingdom was in constant dispute because of the discussion of the silver for crimes. The people were not calm, and it was said that several states had revolted. When he came back this time, those hidden dangers in the Qi Kingdom were all gone. A few years ago, under the leadership of the third prince, the court adopted a gentle method and implemented the debit and credit bookkeeping system. Until now, it had been quite effective. Although the corruption among the officials had not been completely stopped, it had been quite effective. As expected, those who could become the emperor were not easy to deal with. Li Yi did not know what the emperor of the Qi Kingdom thought about the struggle for the throne, but he did play a good hand. For a long time, including now, the prosperity of the Qi Kingdom was justified. If it was not for the rapid rise of the Jing Kingdom in recent years, perhaps they would still be living under the shadow of the Qi Kingdom. As for who would become the emperor of the Qi Kingdom, Li Yi did not care much. It had little to do with him. Whether Zhao Zheng or Zhao Yi took over the Qi Kingdom, they would not pose much of a threat to the Jing Kingdom. A long time ago, the Jing Kingdom had been at the forefront of the times, and the speed of its advancement was getting faster and faster, leaving the other countries far behind. It even had the perspective of God. Li Xian had been improving the cannons, and he had also begun to develop and supervise the manufacture of many other types of firearms. As long as they did not encounter an extremely fatuous emperor who overthrew everything they had done, the current Jing Kingdom was not something that the Qi Kingdom could catch up with, even if it had one or a few wise emperors. Under such circumstances, of course, he hoped that Zhao Yi would be the one to take over. All his life he was not fond of owing favors. He did not like owing favors to women, and he did not like owing favors to men. The former could be repaid with his body, but if he wanted to repay the latter, he would have to do something else. There was no doubt that the third prince, Zhao Yi, had played a great role in the smooth sailing of the Lin family's business for the past few years. It could be said that he had taken good care of Wanru. This was a great favor. Just based on this point, the scales in his heart had to tilt in favor of him. Of course, it was impossible for him to go to his side and give him advice now, but he did not mind giving him a push when it was necessary. Lin Wanru walked out of the room and gave some instructions to Lin Yong. Although the Liuzhou was far from the capital of the Qi kingdom, and it was not considered an important military town, it was a big commercial province. Geographically speaking, the Liuzhou was in the hinterland of the Qi kingdom and did not border other countries, so it did not have the conditions to become a big commercial province. However, the people of the Liuzhou had been raising silkworms for generations, and the silk of the Liuzhou was famous far and wide. This time Lin Wanru came to expand the silk and clothing business. If it was successful, perhaps the Liuzhou would become their biggest clothing base in the Qi kingdom. Lin Yong looked at Li Yi, who was not far away, and then looked at Lin Wanru and asked, "Miss, how long will we stay in the Liuzhou this time?" Lin Wanru was the helmsman of the Lin family. She only needed to ensure that the general direction was not wrong, so she did not need to stay in the Liuzhou for a long time. Other things would be handled by the steward. After thinking for a while, she said, "About a month." Lin Yong looked at Li Yi and asked, "Li brothers, how long will you stay in the Liuzhou?" Ruoqing was pregnant. They could either go back to Shuzhou or Rui City now, or stay here and wait for her to give birth. Although Rui City and Shuzhou were more suitable for nurturing the fetus, they were already deep in the Qi kingdom. If they went back, it would probably take a few months. The journey would be tiring and bumpy. After discussing with Li Yi and Rui, they decided to stay in the Liuzhou and go back after she gave birth. However, in this way their plan to deed her from the Qi kingdom to the Jing kingdom would have to be put on hold. Li Yi thought for a while and said, "Less than a year." During this time, naturally, he would not only wait for Ruoqing to give birth, but also carefully plan the affairs of the holy religion and the business of the Qi kingdom. Miss Lin only planned to stay here for a month, but the Li brothers wanted to stay for almost a year. Lin Yong thought for a while, looked at Lin Wanru and said, "Miss, I think that the Liuzhou is different from other places. The business here is developed and there are many rich businessmen. If we enter the Liuzhou abruptly and meddle in the business of the Liuzhou, I'm afraid that they will be dissatisfied and suppress us. In order to avoid accidents, I'm afraid we should stay for a few more days. It's safer this way. Miss, what do you think?" Hearing this, Lin Wanru nodded and said, "You're right. Then let's stay for a few more days." Lin Yong agreed deeply. He smiled and said, "I think we should also stay for a year and a half. It should be enough." Lin Wanru looked at him and frowned slightly. When she was about to speak, a young man knocked on the courtyard door and walked in with a few attendants. "Miss Lin," he looked at Lin Wanru and said with a smile, "I'm here to discuss the cooperation between the Lin and Lu families." Lin Wanru and the young man went to the parlor. Lin Yong did not follow them. He walked to Li Yi and said, "They are from the Lu family. The Lu family is the largest magnate in the Liuzhou. They are relatives of the royal family and have been in the silk business for generations." Li Yi looked at Lin Yong in surprise. He seemed to be a little too talkative today. These days he comes here every day to talk about cooperation. Lin Yong pursed his lips and said, "Don't think that I can't see it. What business talk? He has been dragging the matter of cooperation. He is here to pursue our family's miss." Li Yi continued to look at him. "I just remembered and said it casually." Seeing Li Yi look at him, Lin Yong waved his hand and said, "I definitely did not say that he is Li brothers' rival in love. I also did not hint at you to pursue our Mississippi Li brothers. Please don't misunderstand, please don't misunderstand." Chapter 11:14. The young man walked out of the hall and cupped his hands at Lin Wanru. He said, "Miss Wanru, I believe you know that this is good for both the Lin and Lu families. I hope you can consider what I have said." Lin Wanru shook her head and simply said, "If young Master Lu is referring to something other than cooperation, then there is no need to consider it." The young man was not angry. He only smiled and said, "I have come with sincerity. Miss Lin, there is no need to reject me. We still have some time, so you don't have to rush to answer." With that he cupped his hands and left. When he left, his eyes paused on Li Yi for a moment. But it was only for a moment and he slowly walked out. "Li brothers, look, this young Master Lu is also handsome and elegant. If you don't seize the opportunity..." Before Lin Yong could finish, he was dragged away by Fang with his mouth covered. Li Yi raised his head and looked at Lin Wanru. He asked, "Are you having trouble with your business?" It's not really a problem. Lin Wanru shook her head and sat across from him. She said, the Liu family in Liuzhou is also in the cloth and silk business. In recent years they have expanded into ready-made clothing. It is more or less the same as us. We are in the same place and doing the same business. If we can't be friends, we can only be enemies. Moreover, Liuzhou is only so big. The big families have already divided the resources. It is not so easy for us to get another piece of the pie. They have the materials and the market. We have the technology. Cooperation is a win-win situation. Li looked at her and asked, you don't seem too willing? What they want is not just cooperation. Lin Wanru shook her head and said, they want me to marry them. She looked at Li Yi and blinked. She said, Manager Li, in the contract we negotiated, there is no such thing as selling myself, of course. Li Yi nodded and said, cooperation is cooperation, but this request is too much. We absolutely can't agree to it. We can stop doing business in Liuzhou, but we can't treat marriage lightly. Not necessarily. Lin Wanru looked out the door and said, the Liu family is a relative of the royal family and their influence runs deep. Their silk business is spread all over the Qi kingdom. Not only in the Liu province but in other places as well. Although the Lin family has accumulated some wealth over the years and is praised by many, their foundation is still shallow. Without the protection of the third prince, they would be like duckweed in the water, willow catkins in the wind, at the mercy of others. Li shook his head and said, marriage should be the result of two people liking each other. It shouldn't be some kind of exchange of benefits and it shouldn't be a child's play. In this world, how can everything be perfect, Rui? Lin Wanru smiled and said, in this world, how many couples don't like each other? So what if they like each other? So what if they don't like each other? Isn't it all for life? Don't be so pessimistic. I'm only a few months younger than Sister Rui. Dwainer is already 5 years old now. He was a playmate of our neighbor when he was young. Our child just got engaged last month. She laughed self-deprecatingly and said, if I don't get married soon, no one will want me. The famous Miss Lin will have no one who wants you? Li looked at her and shook his head. If you say that you want to get married, the number of men who want to marry you will probably line up from the Liu province all the way to the capital. Lin Wanru looked at him and asked, Manager Li, are you saying this because you want me to earn more money for the Li family for a few more years? The Lin and the Li are a family. Saying this makes us seem distant. Li shook his head and said, fate is a strange thing. Sometimes it happens just like that. Wanru, you are in the prime of your life now. Wait for another year or two, it won't be a problem. You make it sound nice. Lin Wanru raised her eyebrows and said, if you don't get married while there are still people who want you now, will you marry me in another 2 years if you really can't get married? After she said this, the two of them stopped talking. The atmosphere was a little awkward. You know, there are already 4 of us in my family now. It's a mess usually. Li Yi was the first to break the silence. He lowered his head and sighed. Lin Wanru couldn't help but laugh. She waved her hand and said, I'm just joking. Don't worry, I won't marry you. Her eyes were originally clear and bright, but at a certain moment, they seemed to have lost their luster. The family is already messy enough. It doesn't matter if you're one more. Li raised his head and said, no one wants you anyway. Why don't you think about it when the time comes? Outside the courtyard, Lin Yong and Fang were sitting on a big tree. Looking at Li Yi, who was being chased and beaten in the courtyard, Fang patted Lin Yong's shoulder and said, see, it's none of your business. Why were you in such a hurry just now? Lin Yong nodded guiltily and said, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Learn more in the future? Fang lectured him seriously and jumped down from the tree. Lin Yong stared blankly for a moment, then glanced downwards and instantly felt dizzy. He hugged the tree trunk and shouted, let me down, I'm afraid of heights. To Li Yi, the business in Liuzhou was dispensable. Even the business in the entire Qi kingdom did not mean much to him. The Li family's business was spread across all the prefectures in the Qi kingdom. He also had the tax revenue from Shuzhou and Rui City. The money he earned was enough. Not only was it enough, but it could also support Yang Liuqing in his rebellion. It was more than enough. He did not have any big ambitions such as becoming the richest man in the world. If that was the only ambition he had, it was very likely that he had already achieved it. But since he was going to stay in Liuzhou for a while and had nothing to do, he would do some things while he was at it. If others wanted to fight for something, he did not mind playing along. The business expansion in Liuzhou was still in the preliminary stage, so there would not be any obstacles for the time being. Su Zheng's plan to unify the holy religion had encountered a big obstacle. Before Liuzhou, they had unified more than 10 prefectures and did not encounter too many obstacles. Perhaps this finally alerted the other party. The next few prefectures that Su Zheng brought people to could no longer be contacted. The headquarters of the holy religion was in the capital of the Qi kingdom. There were branches in most of the prefectures and prefectures in the Qi kingdom. These branches were managed by the elites of the holy religion. On normal days they had one-way contact with the followers. When Su Zheng and the others went there, they did not contact these people. As a result, they could not get the list of followers. All their actions could only be put on hold. The Qi kingdom was much larger than the Wu kingdom and the Jing kingdom. It had nearly 100 prefectures and prefectures. They had only unified a dozen or so prefectures. After the other party was on guard, every step became extremely difficult. It would take a long time to unify one prefecture and one prefecture. Li Yi thought for a while, then borrowed Wanru's study room and began to write a letter. He wrote a few words on the envelope. To Su Tian. Chapter 11:15. They had to do things in a simple and straightforward manner. They had to solve the biggest problem with the smallest investment. The holy religion claimed to have 100,000 believers in the Qi kingdom. That was 5 or 6 years ago, and it was unknown how many there were now. Was it a big deal to persuade a multi-level marketing organization with 100,000 people to mend their ways and return to the right path? All they needed was a piece of paper to solve this big problem. In the final analysis, the only one standing in their way was the Taoist nun. Without a leader at the master level, the rest of the people were just a plate of loose sand. They were nothing to be afraid of. Unfortunately, Su was very interested in the Taoist nun. There was another person who was more interested in the Taoist nun than Su. He was more interested in the affairs between Su and the Taoist nun. Therefore, what he had to do was to send this letter. The situation in the Wu kingdom was good. Yang Liuqing and the others had already occupied nearly 20 states, which was enough to stand up to the imperial court of the Wu kingdom. Some powerful bandits, who had been observing for a long time, had been showing signs of taking sides in recent days. Outside the cities they occupied, countless people were looking forward to being liberated as soon as possible. They had won countless battles and stabilized the people in the states and prefectures they occupied and saved them from the chaos of war. Today she had become the faith in the hearts of the people in the Wu kingdom. The chaos in the Wu kingdom wouldn't last for a few years. It seemed easy for them to rebel in the Wu kingdom, but in fact there were many predecessors and descendants, and they didn't know whether they were predecessors or descendants. In short, in the 5,000 years of China, countless predecessors and descendants had paved the way for them. If it wasn't for the fact that the Wu kingdom could have a stable regime in the future, they would have been advancing unhurriedly. Relying on these past and future experiences, it was a shame that they hadn't been able to conquer the imperial city of the Wu kingdom until now. Life in Liuzhou was very comfortable. There were not many people here and the scenery was beautiful. The river snail rice noodles were delicious. Li Yi had been to many prefectures, including those of the Jing kingdom, the Qi kingdom, and the Wu kingdom. These prefectures were neither the most prosperous in industry nor the most prosperous in commerce, but overall they gave people a good feeling. The scenery was beautiful and the prefectures were extremely clean. In his mind, the livability index of these prefectures could be ranked in the top 5 among all the prefectures. Lin Wanru and Lin Yong were not very familiar with Liuzhou, but since they were born in the Qi kingdom, they were more familiar with the place than Li Yi and the others. These days Lin Wanru and Lin Yong brought them around. Li Duan liked to play. The main reason was that he didn't need to practice when he played. Moreover, he knew that when he went back this time he would have to go to school with others. There wouldn't be many free and unfettered days. Old Fong was alone on this trip, but he wasn't when he was out having fun. His relationship with Lin Yong progressed rapidly. He often saw Lin Yong asking him for advice with a sincere face. It seemed that ever since he was hung on the tree by Fong, the two of them often got together, and no one knew what they talked about. Wanru was no longer considered an outsider in the Li family. Before Zueimo and Ruoqing came into the family, she got along very well with Rui and Rui. She was one of Mississippi Lu's few friends. The friendship between the two had been forged several years ago. The last time they were in the capital, she even taught Rui how to read poetry. It seemed that from then on, Mississippi Lu only started to take the initiative to learn. Liuzhou was not big. They would occasionally go out for a walk. In half a month they had visited all the places and there was no good place to go. Once people stopped, they would always want to find something to do. But this place was different from the Jing kingdom. There weren't so many opponents who took the initiative to make trouble. It was also different from the Wu kingdom. They couldn't casually rebel, and the days gradually began to become boring. Fortunately, there was Lin Yong to talk to him often. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he always felt that after hanging out with Fong for a period of time, Lin Yong began to talk more. And as he chatted, the topic would always turn to Lin Wanru. Our miss likes to eat sweet things since she was young. When she was young she ate bad teeth. Later she slowly changed. But she usually likes to eat some pastries. Lin Yong almost watched her grow up. Naturally, he knew her character and preferences very well. Also, Miss has been competitive and capable since she was young. Otherwise, old master wouldn't have handed the Lin family over to her. Lin Yong recalled the past and sighed. He said, actually during that period of time Miss didn't have it easy. The family didn't like her and there were a lot of rumors and slanders outside. Miss had to bear all of it alone. After you came, Li brothers, everything changed. Lin Yong's face revealed a happy expression. He said, ever since you helped her deal with the second master, everyone in the family has been obedient to her. These few years there hasn't been any more trouble. It's all thanks to you, Li brothers. It's all because of her own tricks. Li shook his head. Among all the women he knew, the most competitive was probably Rui. But in fact, Mingzhu and Wanru were the same kind of people as her. It was just that they focused on different areas. Rui was good at martial arts, while Mingzhu was good at governing the country. Sometimes even Li Yi himself had to admire Wanru's business methods. Li Yi looked at Lin Yong and asked, has she been so powerful since she was young? That's not all. Lin Yong thought for a while and shook his head. He said, don't be fooled by Mrs. Ability. In fact, she was still wetting the bed when she was 5 years old. Seeing Lin Wanru coming out of the inner courtyard, Lin Yong hurriedly shut up. Seeing that his gaze and expression were not right, Lin Wanru frowned slightly. She walked over and asked, what are you talking about? He's talking about how good you've been at doing business these few years. Li Yi gave her a thumbs up and said, to be honest, I really admire you when it comes to doing business. Since you said that, I'll take it that you're mocking me. Lin Wanru looked at him and said, at best, I'm just a small steward under Manager Li. When it comes to doing business, how can I be better than you? Li shook his head and said, I only know a little more than others in certain aspects. In fact, I don't know much about doing business. There are many things that I still need to ask you. He picked up the teacup and put it down again. He said, right, I happen to have something to ask you. Lin Wanru sat opposite him and asked, what is it? Li thought for a moment and asked, did you really still wet the bed when you were 5 years old? Hearing this, Lin Wanru was startled and Lin Yong's expression changed greatly. Lin Wanru took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling a few times. She almost crushed her teeth and squeezed out 2 words from between her teeth. Lin Yong. Judging from the speed at which Lin Yong escaped, he should have been sparring with Fong recently. His skills were clearly much better than before. Seeing that her face was already red, Li Yi hurriedly said, it's nothing. Lin Yong just mentioned it in passing. I'm not afraid of you laughing at me, but actually, when I was young, she probed, when you were 5 years old you still wet the bed? Looking at Miss Lin's expectant gaze, Li Yi shook his head and said, no, I stopped wetting the bed when I was 1 year old. When Lu Luo stepped into the courtyard he saw such a scene. The legendary woman of the Lin family, who had always been indifferent to men, was blushing as she stretched out her hand to hit another man. Of course, anyone with a discerning eye could see that it was a hit, in a flirtatious manner. He had come here many times under the guise of discussing business, but Lin Wanru had never treated him like this. With just one look he felt a strong sense of jealousy towards that young man. He took a deep breath and calmed himself down. With a smile on his face, he stepped forward and said, Wanru, have you thought about the matter I mentioned last time? Lin Wanru glanced at Li Yi who was beside her. He was still angry about what had happened just now. She said angrily, I'm just a small steward. If young Master Lu has anything to say, it's better to discuss it with my family's shopkeeper. Shopkeeper? Lu Luo was startled. Your family? Li Yi stood up and looked at the young man in front of him. He said, Li Yi, her family's shopkeeper. We can talk about cooperation, but I won't marry. Chapter 11:16. The Lin family of Feng Prefecture was only a new family in the Qi Kingdom. The so-called new clans were naturally different from the Lu clan, which had been around for hundreds of years and had a deep foundation. In terms of prestige, wealth, and influence, the Lu clan, which had been around for generations, was far superior to those nouveau riche clans. In their eyes, the Lin family and the Chen family, which had been in the limelight for the past few years, were all nouveau riches. The wealth that they had accumulated in a short period of time might be comparable to that of a big family like the Lu family. However, their foundation was shallow, to the point that they had no foundation at all. If the Lin family and the Chen family were not backed by the third prince and the Lu family was also one of the third prince's supporters, he would not have been so polite to them. At least, in the territory of Lu Prefecture, the Lu family did not have to be polite to anyone. He had put down his pride and visited the Lin family several times with great sincerity. He had already given the Lin family enough face. However, what Lin Wanru did just now was rubbing his face on the ground. If the head of the wealthy Lin family was only a lowly steward, who else in the world could be called a shopkeeper? This was an insult to him. Lu Luo stopped smiling and said calmly, "Miss Lin, the Lu family came with sincerity. I hope you won't play this kind of joke on me." Lin Wanru shook her head and said, "I'm not joking. This is really our shopkeeper." "If that's the case, then there's nothing else to talk about." Lu Luo stood up and said this. He turned around and left. Although he did not say much, Li could still feel his strong resentment as he walked out of the door. Li looked at Lin Wanru and said, "It's over. You've offended the local bully. If he holds a grudge and seeks revenge, it will be difficult to do business in Lu Prefecture." "What should we do then?" She sighed and said, "Lu Prefecture is not like Feng Prefecture. We have no one to rely on here. We can't win against them. What's there to be afraid of? Lu Zhou isn't even surnamed Lu. Do you think they'll chase you out?" Although Lu Zhou's surname isn't Lu, it isn't Lin either. Li thought about it carefully and said, "That's not necessarily true. If you carefully consider what happened last time, it might be possible to let it have the surname Lin." Lin Wanru looked at him and asked, "What happened last time?" Mississippi Lu walked over from behind and stopped beside him. She asked, "What happened last time?" "Last time. What happened last time?" Li thought for a moment and said, "It doesn't matter what happened last time. Anyway, don't worry about the Lu family. We have a strong foundation in Lu Zhou. We're not any worse than them. Don't worry." Fortunately, the branch of holy religion in Lu Zhou was already under his command. To put it in a small way, he had a certain foundation in the masses. To put it in a big way, he had a certain foundation in rebellion. He was not even afraid of Lu Zhou's government. Why would he be afraid of a mere Lu family? The Lu family. A young man looked at Lu Luo and asked, "She refused?" Lu Luo's face was gloomy. He nodded and said, "The Lu family is a small temple. It can't accommodate a big Buddha like the Lin family. There are so many women in the world. Why did you choose Lin Wanru?" The young man frowned and said, "Although she's not young anymore, she's still the master of the Lin family. How can she be your concubine? Or is it the Lin family that you want?" He looked at Lu Luo with a calm expression, but it made Lu Luo break out in a cold sweat. Although the Lin family didn't have much of a foundation in terms of wealth, several Lu family couldn't compare. If he really won over Lin Wanru and the Lin family, his status in the Lu family would definitely rise. At that time, the one who would be the most unhappy would be his brother. He hurriedly explained, "I'm not doing this for the good of the family. Even if we can't get the Lin family, as long as we can subdue that woman, we won't have to worry about the family's prosperity. Brother, do you also want the Lu family to hide in this small Lu Zhou?" The young man looked at him vaguely and said, "Since she doesn't want to give face to the Lu family, we don't have to show her any mercy. As the saying goes, a powerful dragon cannot crush a snake in its own territory." This saying was very reasonable. After offending the Lu family, the supply to Lu Zhou was cut off the next day. This time they came to Lu Zhou because the textile industry in Lu Zhou was developed. It was the largest producer of silk in the Qi kingdom. If they built a clothing store here, they could save a lot of money and unnecessary expenses. In this way, they had to rely on the supply from Lu Zhou. This was a win-win situation for both parties. Before Li Yi and the others arrived in Lu Zhou, countless merchants had come to them to seek cooperation. They were almost crying and begging to hitch a ride on the Lin family's wagon. In the past few days, those merchants who had reached an agreement with each other sent their stewards over. They used various reasons for the lack of supply to terminate the cooperation. At first, considering that the store was still in the construction stage and the details had not been decided, they did not sign a contract. These merchants regretted their decision at the same time. Several stewards went to many other merchants and received the same answer. The Lu family wanted to use this method to cut off their supply. This was a childish but effective method. No one was willing to sell raw materials to them. Naturally, the store could not continue to operate. One of the stewards said anxiously, "Shopkeeper, please think of a way. We have already invested so much in Luzhou. If this happens, all the money from before will be wasted." Another shopkeeper complained, "Merchants should keep their word. How can they go back on their word? This is clearly a trap for us. Shopkeeper, please make a decision." Lin Wanru looked at the anxious stewards and looked at Li Yi. She said, "Shopkeeper, you make the decision." Li Yi realized that the business world's Hua Mulan Lin Wanru, Miss Lin's recent actions did not match her title at all. Every day she would drink tea and chat with Rui and the others. She would even ask Rui to teach her a few self-defense moves. After hearing that Rui and the others had all learned the youthful technique, she completely ignored the business. The arrangements and deployment of the business in Liuzhou fell on his shoulders. She kept saying that she was a steward, but how was she a steward? She was clearly the fifth madam of the Li family. However, the fifth madam's attitude was the fifth madam's attitude. After all, he had been a hands-off shopkeeper for 5 years. He had to be more tolerant of this willful steward. If she decided to wash her hands of the job and quit, where could he find such a good fifth steward? Li looked at Su Zheng, who was standing at the side, and said, "Envoy Su, sorry to trouble you." The Lu family. Lu Luo sat in the hall with a sneer on his face. The Lin family's business was very big. It had spread all over the Qi kingdom. It was much bigger than the Lu family's business. However, it should not be forgotten that this was Liuzhou, the Lu family's Liuzhou. In Liuzhou, even the tiger had to lie down and the dragon had to lie down. Lin Wanru did not give him any face. She did not give the Lu family any face. In Liuzhou they would not be able to do anything. The Wu family. The Wu family's silk business in Liuzhou was not the best, but it could be ranked in the top 5. At this moment, the master of the Wu family was sending the few people out of the mansion respectfully. He bowed to the person at the front and said, "Sir Envoy, please be rest assured. I will keep the people under control. They will not cause trouble for you." Su Jing nodded with a cold expression on his face. The few shopkeepers of the Lin family followed behind. Each of them looked as if they had seen a ghost. Just yesterday they stood at the door of the Wu family. They did not even enter the main door. It had only been a day, but the master of the Wu family saw them as if he had seen his ancestor. To be more precise, he saw Envoy Su. It was not just the Wu family. They had gone to a few other families. The attitude of those family heads was exactly the same as the master of the Wu family. They easily signed a contract with the other party. Those stingy cheapskates all wanted to give them as much as they could this time. They could not refuse. The people of Liuzhou were terrifyingly simple. Chapter 11-17. The Wu family, the Qin family, and the Wei family, have they lost their minds? In the Lu residence, Lu Luo, who had just received the news, had a dark expression on his face. He was pacing in the hall and growling in a low voice. This time he had mobilized the Lu family's resources and joined forces with the other major clans in Luzhou to cut off the Lin family's supply of goods, completely blocking the Lin family's escape route. The other party's shop and workshop in Luzhou had already been built. If there was no supply of goods, all the initial investment would be for naught. At this time, if he used another identity to negotiate with Lin Wanru, the result would be completely different from before. However, he did not expect that after a few days of gloating, the blockade he had formed with the major clans in Luzhou to seal off the Lin family would be torn open. The Wu family, the Qin family, and the Wei family were not as rich and powerful as the Lu family, but when they joined forces, the Lu family could not touch them easily. The problem was that they had previously promised him that they would unite to fight against the Lin family, who was an outsider. However, at the critical moment they went back on their word, causing the Lu family to waste a lot of resources. Could it be that these clans were spies planted by the Lin family in Luzhou? Lu Luo asked with a dark expression. "What did they say?" One of the servants hesitated for a moment before saying, They said that they would be bastards if they didn't earn money. Thank you, young master, for giving them the opportunity to cooperate with the Lin family." Lu Luo almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He said furiously, bastards, they've been fooling me from the beginning." "Shut up." A middle-aged man walked in from outside the door and glanced at Lu Luo. The latter immediately shut his mouth. He could be arrogant in front of outsiders, but he did not dare to lose his composure in front of his father, the current master of the Lu family. "I handed over the Lu family's business to you. Look at what you've done these days." The middle-aged man looked at him coldly and said, "The Lin family could not have come this far without the support of the third prince. If you go against the Lin family, you are going against the third prince. Are you going to take the blame or the Lu family? Father, Lu Luo opened his mouth but did not say anything. The middle-aged man paused for a moment before continuing. However, even though the third prince thinks highly of the Lin family, our Lu family is not one to be trifled with. If we were to lose like this, I'm afraid that the third prince will look down on us. Lu Luo was delighted to hear that and immediately said, Father, you are right. The Lu family is a century-old family. How can we lose to the Lin family? Why don't we? Before he could finish, the middle-aged man waved his hand and said, Put away your crooked tricks. The business world is like a battlefield. Even if you want to win, you have to win fair and square. I want to see if the legend of the Lin family is really that capable, or if the rumors are exaggerated. Li Yi felt that the rumors about the Lin family's favored daughter were exaggerated. She did not care about anything these days. She was more familiar with Rui and the others than he was. Rui taught her the youth-retaining technique that he had tricked from old Taoist Yuan. She shared her beauty and skincare tips with them. She was no different from those rich ladies in the capital city who had nothing to do. She did not look like a businesswoman at all. In the end, he had to do all the work himself. In the Li family, such a lazy steward would have long been fired and left to starve to death. This is so infuriating. Li Yi sat in the yard and browsed through the accounts. Lin Wanru's maid Xiu came in and sat opposite him. She had her hair tied into 2 buns and looked sullen. Her angry look made her look a little cute. What's wrong? Li Yi asked casually. It's those people. The little girl put her hands on her hips, and the anger on her face had not dissipated. She said, We opened a clothing store and they also opened a clothing store. They chose to open it before we opened our store, and they even cut the price by 10%. They are clearly trying to steal our business. Xiu had been with Lin Wanru since she was a child. She followed her everywhere and traveled with her. She was very familiar with some things in the business world. However, her mentality and character were still not used to the business world. A business war was a war without gunpowder. A large-scale business war, in terms of influence and power, was not inferior to a war. The difference was that a war was a real one. After the war, there would be a lot of corpses. After a business war, there would often be no bones left. If they do this when we open in 2 days, there will be no customers. The little girl wiped her tears. She had been following the business expansion in Liuzhou from beginning to end. She had worked so hard for so long, but in the end, the peaches were taken by others. She felt so wrong that she was about to cry. Li Yi had a headache when he saw the girl cry. He hurriedly said, Don't cry, don't cry. It's just stealing customers. I will teach you a trick that can definitely steal all our customers. It's true. Xiu rubbed her eyes and looked at him with surprise. She trusted young Master Li very much. Sometimes she even trusted him more than she trusted her own Mississippi. Because when her miss encountered something she could not decide, she would also listen to Li. Don't worry about it. Li put down the account book and said, Let's talk about something else first. Xiu how old were you with your miss? Xiu thought for a moment and said, 9 years old. How old was your miss at that time? I think 14 years old. Then, when your miss was 14 years old, did she still wet the bed? From the beginning, Li Yi saw Lin Wanru standing in the distance and looking at them from time to time. At a certain moment she finally came over and asked, You and Xiu what were you talking about just now? Li Yi said helplessly, You didn't teach her how to deal with the Lu family, so I had to teach her myself. Lin Wanru still looked a little doubtful and asked, That's all? That's all. Li Yi looked at her and said in surprise, Xiu was about to cry because of the Lu family's means. I just taught her how to deal with it. What else could I say besides that? I can't say that you still wet the bed occasionally after you were 10 years old, can I? Lin Wanru was stunned, and then her face began to blush and blush. Generally, people would not wet the bed after they were 1 or 2 years old, but before she was 14 years old, this kind of shameful thing would happen occasionally. This embarrassment lasted until she was 14 years old and then disappeared completely. But after she was 5 years old, the only one who knew about this matter besides her was Xiu who slept with her at that time. How long had it been? The 2 closest people around her had actually betrayed her at the same time. Xiu she clenched her teeth and turned to the inner courtyard. A puzzled look appeared on Li Yi's face. Did he say anything wrong just now? What's the point of venting your anger on Xiu? If you have the ability, come at me. In the Lu family, Lu Luo held a piece of paper in his hand and asked uncertainly, Do they really give this kind of thing all over the street? The servant nodded and said, "Yes, young master." The shopkeeper and the shop assistant of their shop have a thick stack of it in their hands. They give it to everyone they see. The one in my hand was forced to me by them. It is said that they also recruited people and gave them 10 copper coins a day. Lu Luo looked at the paper in his hand and said with a smile, "They cut the price by 10% on the first day, by 20% on the second day, by 30% on the third and fourth day. Half a month later they actually cut the price by 90%. He put the paper on the table and said mockingly, "They cut the price by 10%. Why didn't they give it away for free?" The Lu family gave 10% of the profit, so the number of customers in the shop had multiplied over the past few days. They had the idea of small profits but quick turnover. However, small profits but quick turnover did not mean that the lower the price, the better. 10% of the price was far lower than the cost price. The more they sold, the more they would lose. If the people of Luzhou bought their goods on the last 2 days, even if the Lin family was wealthy and did not care about the loss of Luzhou, they would still become a joke in the business world. What the proud daughter of the Lin family, the Hua Mulan of the business world. It turned out that it was all just a rumor. In half a month, get someone to buy a lot of the Lin family's goods. Lu Luo twitched the corner of his mouth and said, "They just opened for business and they already gave us such a big gift. They are too kind." Chapter 11:18. There were a few new clothing stores in Liuzhou. Almost everyone inside and outside the city knew about it. The news spread far and wide. It was no less than half a year ago when the provincial governor of Liuzhou was arrested for corruption, or when a group of bandits who had been harming the people for more than a decade were all beheaded by the government. Within a day everyone knew about it. It was not entirely because the newly opened stores were cutting prices so much that it was unprecedented. The main reason was that no one had seen the overwhelming publicity on the streets and alleys of the city. Almost everyone in Liuzhou had a copy of the leaflet that was the size of a palm. There was more than one. After reading through the leaflet, the literate people knew that this was a big discount for the opening of the clothing store. After half a month they could buy ready-made clothes and cloth at a low price of 10%. They had seen shops reduce prices for promotion, but they had never seen such a ruthless reduction. What was the difference between 10% of the price and giving it away for free? Those who could not read took the leaflet and asked others. They understood the general meaning. After asking, they were puzzled and in disbelief. A few days ago the Lu family had cut prices by 10%. Many people already thought that they were taking advantage of the situation. Several stores were crowded with customers. The prices of these newly opened shops had been reduced to only 10%. Compared to the preferential treatment offered by the Lu family, the difference was nearly 10 times. It seemed to be somewhat inadequate. They did not have to worry that the other party would cheat them. The words on the leaflet were very clear. If they wanted to play tricks like raising prices first and then lowering prices, the government would not let them go. On the street, a woman took the leaflet from a shop assistant. After looking at it, she said in surprise, "In a few days their clothes will be so cheap. If it's true, we have to buy a few more." The man next to her said in surprise, "Didn't you just buy a few days ago? Why are you still buying?" The woman rolled her eyes and said, "Those are from the Lu family. How can the Lu family's things compare to the Lin family's? I've been looking forward to their store opening in Liuzhou for a long time. The prices are so cheap. It would be a waste not to buy them." The man hesitated for a moment and asked, "You bought so many clothes. Can you wear them all?" "I'm a woman. What's wrong with a woman buying a few beautiful clothes?" The woman looked at him and said with dissatisfaction, "Besides, no matter how many clothes I buy, aren't they all for you to see?" What about me? You're a scholar but you don't even know how to calculate." Buying a piece of clothing from the Lu family is equivalent to buying 2 or 10 pieces of clothing from the Lin family, but it's not even as beautiful as the Lin family. If I buy it this time, I won't have to buy it again this year. Do the math. How much money can you save? What about me? Do you not love me anymore? No, you didn't even buy me clothes. You really don't love me anymore. Did you fall in love with some vixen? Then let's buy it," the man sighed. The Lin family, the Lin family, the Lin family's underwear, the Lin family's perfume and soap, the Lin family's ready-made clothes, and the money he earned from selling his paintings were all given to the Lin family. Fortunately, although his wife spent a lot of money, she always kept her word. If she said she wouldn't buy it this year, she wouldn't buy it again this year. However, it seemed that there were only 2 months left this year. Before the Lin family's ready-made clothes shop opened for business, it had already attracted the attention of countless people. Regardless of how many people would patronize it, at least it was the first time in history that a few small shops could cause such a sensation. On the first day of the shop's opening, several shop assistants and shopkeepers were anxiously waiting, but there were only a few customers. Most of the people who came to take a look were asking if the 90% price reduction in half a month was true. Not a single person was really willing to buy. When the Liu family cut the price by 10%, the shop's threshold was almost trampled to pieces. Now that they had the same price as the Liu family, the shop was deserted. Comparing the two, it was really sad. "Sir, what are you looking at?" Seeing someone come in, a shop assistant hurriedly greeted him. "I heard that your shop will reduce the price by 90% in half a month?" The man looked at the shop assistant and asked doubtfully, "Is it true?" "Absolutely." The shop assistant smiled and asked, "Sir, do you want to look at clothes?" "What do you want to look at?" The man glared at him and said, "Do you think I'm stupid to spend the money of 9 clothes to buy one? Why don't I come back in half a month?" "Sir, take care." Watching the customer leave, the shop assistant's face showed a polite but not awkward smile. "It's over?" He walked in front of a manager and said, "If they all come back in half a month, we will lose a lot." Although the manager was also extremely nervous, he still comforted him. "This is only the first day, you have to believe in miss." The second day, all the clothes in the shop were 20% off. There were more customers entering the shop than yesterday, but still no one was willing to buy. The third day, the fourth day, all the clothes and fabrics were sold at 30% off. There were more customers entering the shop and a few people were willing to buy, but it was only a small number. Several shops added up only sold a dozen pieces. The Liu family. Ha ha. Lu Luo couldn't help but laugh. In the past few days he had been paying attention to the situation of the Lin family's shop, so he was very clear about the situation there. The Liu family's main business was the silk fabric business. He was very clear about the profits. Once the price was cut by more than 50%, it would be a business that would definitely lose money. The more they sold, the more they would lose. What would they earn? Their reputation? He wanted to learn from the Liu family's methods, but he failed. He just had to wait for the Lin family to become a joke in Liuzhou. At that time he would like to see how that Lin Wanru could be arrogant in front of him. Lu Luo laughed happily, but Xiu'er was about to cry. What should I do? She anxiously paced around in the yard. This was the fourth day. More and more people entered the shop, but only a few were willing to buy. If this continued, the price would continue to drop and they would lose money. Li Duan ran over with 2 candied haws in his hands. He handed one to her and said, "Sister Xiu'er, don't worry. This candied haw is for you." Xiu'er was not in the mood to eat the candied haw, so she returned it to Li Duan. Li Duan couldn't eat too, so he reached out and handed it to her again. "Aunt Lin, this is for you." "Thank you, Duaner." Lin Wanru didn't refuse. She took the candied haw and gently took a bite. She looked at Xiu'er and said, "Don't worry. You'll know tomorrow." Li Yi knew that there was still someone who understood him. The 60% discount was actually a critical point, and this had been proven in the future. Not everyone had the patience to wait for half a month. The discount price seemed very tempting, but in fact before that all the goods would be sold out at around 50% off. In fact, it was up to the merchants themselves to decide whether the goods were sold out or not. At that time, the Lin family had quickly opened up the market in Lu province. They used some marketing tactics from time to time. The Lin family ate the meat while the Lu family and other families could only drink the soup. When they were in Feng province, he had already taught Miss Lin about these tactics. If she hadn't been busy learning how to be beautiful from Rui, she wouldn't have had to do it herself. She could have completely destroyed the Lu family. In comparison, the tactics he taught Xiu'er this time were very gentle. 2 women walked out of a clothing shop in the Lin family. The woman on the left looked back and said, "That fairy dress is so beautiful. I must buy it when it's 50% off." The woman on the right smiled and said, "Great, I like it too. It'll be 50% off in 2 days so we can buy 2 different sets. We'll come again on that day." "Sure." "That's settled then." The next day, all the goods in the Lin family's clothing shops in Lu province were sold at 40% off. Early in the morning, when the sky was just beginning to brighten, the 2 women met again at the entrance of the shop. One of them looked at the other and said, "Didn't we agree to come together the day after tomorrow?" The other woman looked embarrassed. "I'm just here to take a look." The woman was silent for a moment before she asked, "Don't tell me you're going to snatch that fairy dress from me. I saw you looking at it for a long time yesterday." The other woman said unhappily, "What do you mean by yours?" It belongs to whoever gets it first. Behind them, the crowd had already blocked the entire street. Open the door. It's already so late. Open the door. That's right. This is how you do business. Someone could not help but step forward and knock on the door. Open the door. Open the door. One of the workers yawned and opened the door a little. When he opened his eyes, he was stunned. The next moment, he closed the door without hesitation. His face was filled with fear as he shouted, "Shopkeeper, something bad has happened. Someone wants to destroy our shop." Chapter 11:19. Everyone, please line up outside. Don't push, don't push. There are too many customers, please forgive us. The supply is limited, each person can only buy 5 pieces at a time, 5 pieces at a time. Even though they were greatly understaffed, there were still a few workers maintaining order at the entrance of the clothing stores. Outside each store there was a long line of customers. Even in the stores on both sides of the same street, the customers lined up together. 2 days ago, when the Lin family store reduced the price by 30%, many people were still in a wait-and-see state. After all, the price would be reduced by 10% every 2 days, and no one wanted to spend more money for nothing. But today, when the price was reduced to 60%, everyone couldn't sit still. Although after 10 days they could buy the goods at the original price at 10% lower, the problem was, before that, what if the goods they liked were bought by others? 60% was already an unimaginably low price. If they were one step late, the goods in the store would be sold out, and what was the use of 10% lower price? This led to the prosperity of several stores today. Inside the shop, the smiles on the faces of all the employees and stewards never disappeared. The depression and worry of the past few days were swept away at this moment. If there were as many customers tomorrow as today, they wouldn't even have to wait for the day when the price would be reduced by 50%, and all their goods would be sold out tomorrow. This time Xiu was in the mood to eat candied haws. She held a hawthorn and a fruit assortment in one hand, looked at her miss and said happily, "Miss, you are really clever. How did you know that the customers today couldn't help it?" Only then did she know why her miss asked several stewards to urgently transfer goods to the neighboring states of Lu province a few days ago. She had been with her miss for so many years and had seen many scenes, but it was the first time she saw the scene where the whole city people were frantically buying. Ahem. Li coughed lightly. He was the one who told her this idea. How could it be her miss who was clever? Xiu took a bite of the assortment of candied haws, looked at Li Yi and said, "We are family, Li, don't be so stingy." If Li Yi was stingy, he wouldn't have used such a violent method to open up the market. Although they could still make a lot of money from the price reduction, their ready-made clothes were cheap and of good quality. They were very popular in both the Qi and Jing kingdoms. They were always in short supply and there had never been a time when they couldn't sell. This time he was only making a name for himself in Liuzhou and giving a portion of the profits to the people. What he gained was long-term development. Later on they would organize membership events, birthday events and the like. Then, they would be able to gain a firm foothold in Liuzhou. To be honest, Li did not care much about the business in Lu province or even the Qi kingdom. However, it was different for Xiu'er and Lin Wanru. He had no choice but to do something since he had nothing to do anyway. However, there were people who cared more about the Lin family's business in Liuzhou than him. Lu Luo had just returned from outside. His face was frighteningly gloomy. He had just gone to the Lin family's shop to take a look. The street was filled with people. As he walked through the crowd, his wallet and the jade pendant on him had been stolen. There were more than 10 people who stopped him and asked if he should queue up for him for 5 taels of silver each time. He thought that the Lin family's ready-made clothes shop would be deserted as usual. It would not be until 10 days later that the people who had been waiting for a long time would rush to buy the clothes at a low price. By then, the Lin family would lose everything they had invested in Liuzhou. However, today was only the 5th day and things had developed in a direction that he had not expected. There was a long queue outside every Lin family's shop. He had lived for more than 20 years and had never seen such a grand scene. Even the biggest temple fair in Liuzhou city was not as grand as this. Although 60% of the price was already very low with such a large sales volume, it was enough to ensure that they would not lose money. This was like a slap to Lu Luo's face. With the Lin family's interference, unless the Lu family reduced the price from 90% to 70% or 60% in the future, there would not be much effect. More importantly, after this, the Lin family shops would completely enter the sight of the people of Liuzhou. The first to be affected would be the Lu family's business. A shopkeeper had already reported that the Lu family's shop did not have a single customer today. A servant beside him raised his head and asked, "Young master, what should we do? They are limited to 5 pieces per person. Even if we want to buy, we won't be able to buy much." Lu Luo thought for a moment and said, "Go find more people. In 2 days, when they reduce the price to 40%, we must buy all of their goods before anyone else." "But young master, I think that before they reduce the price to 40%, all of their goods will be sold out. Then 50% it is." Lu Luo gritted his teeth and said, "This time the Lu family suffered losses because of them. This time we must earn back all of it." After the meal, Li Yi took Ruoqing out for a walk. When they came back, they saw more than 10 carriages parked in front of the mansion. Lin Yong was directing them to unload the goods. He first helped Ruoqing back to rest. When he came out again, he walked to the courtyard and sat down. He asked Lin Wanru, who was sitting opposite him, "Have the goods arrived?" Lin Wanru nodded. "Just arrived. Logically speaking, they should have arrived a few days ago. It took me some time to transport the outdated models from the other states. After the influence of the past few years, some of the common people in the Jing Kingdom and the Qi Kingdom had learned to follow the fashion trend. The ready-made clothing stores would also introduce new styles in time. Those outdated styles would be eliminated and lowered to a lower level. Then they would target the low-end market and sell them at a low price. Li Yi thought for a moment and looked at Lin Wanru. He asked, "You're not thinking of canceling the limit of 5 pieces per person, are you?" "Not at all." Lin Wanru shook her head and said, "I just feel that 5 pieces is too few. Many customers have objections. Why don't we change it to 500 pieces? Li Yi thought for a moment and asked, "Won't this be too much?" Lin Wanru sighed and said, "If we don't go too far, they will go even more. Don't offend women, especially smart women." Li Yi concluded another life philosophy. It had been a day since the Lin family's shop reduced prices by 50%. Lu Luo looked at a servant with a gloomy face and said, "I told you to get more people to line up. What are you doing?" The servant looked bitter and said, "Young master, you told us to go earlier. I got up before dawn, but who knew that there would be a long line in front of their door?" Lu Luo looked at him and asked expressionlessly, "Are you blaming me for not thinking it through?" "I wouldn't dare." The servant hurriedly shook his head and said respectfully, "Young master, from tomorrow onwards each person can buy at most 500 pieces. I won't sleep today. After they close tonight, I'll bring some people to guard their door. This time there won't be any problems. If there's a problem this time, don't come to see me again." "Don't worry, young master." The Lin family's ready-made clothing store had been selling at half price for a day. After the craze 2 days ago, the number of customers did not decrease. Instead, it increased. However, the people who got up before dawn the next day to line up realized something. A group of people with straw mats and quilts wrapped in them were sitting in front of the big stores. It seemed that they had been here since last night. This scene naturally made them speechless. It was already very cold at night in Lu Province. To actually line up since last night just to buy a few pieces of clothing, this was more than crazy. It was a little crazy. Even the shop assistant who opened the store in the morning was shocked. After the store opened, those people threw the straw mats and quilts aside and swaggered into the store. Because the store space was limited, only about 10 people could enter at a time. The shop assistant smiled and asked, "Sir, please take a look first. Call me if you like anything." The first man who entered the store waved his hand and said, "I'll take all of these in your store." At the same time, the same situation happened in all the big stores of the Lin family. Chapter 11:20. "Sir, how many did you say just now?" The shop assistant was startled and asked with some uncertainty. 500. The man frowned and said, "I want all of these in your shop. If it's not enough, I'll make up for it." The shop assistant looked troubled and asked, "Sir, if you want to buy 500 pieces, what about the customers behind you? What does it have to do with me?" The man looked at him with dissatisfaction and said angrily, "Hurry up, my time is precious." "Sir, cut the crap. Are you selling or not?" "Yes." A steward came over and nodded heavily. He ordered the people behind him, "Wrap them all up." After that, he pointed to another person, "You go and urgently transfer a batch of goods from the warehouse." The clothes in the shop were quickly packed and valued. Another shop assistant moved the new goods from the warehouse and hung them up again. A shop assistant walked to the second person and said, "Sir, please take a look first." "No need." The man waved his hand and said, "Pack them all up and make up for 500 pieces." The steward hesitated for a moment and said, "Sir, if you pack them all up, we won't have any stock in the shop. That's none of my business." The man shook his head and said, "Since you're open for business and you've set the rules, I want 500 pieces. Not one more, not one less. Just tell me if you're selling or not." The steward looked at him and thought for a moment. He nodded and said, "Yes." Some customers behind them were dissatisfied. "What's wrong with you? You bought all of them. What should we do?" "Yes, you're not following the rules. Shopkeeper, you can't sell them to him." Hearing the objections of the customers behind them, a few strong men stepped forward and asked, "Who said we're unreasonable just now?" As the few of them stepped out, a terrifying aura pressed down on them. These people were obviously in cahoots. The few people who spoke just now immediately shut their mouths. The man turned around and said, "What are you waiting for? Pack them up." Outside the shop, the people who were still waiting in line were already in an uproar. What are they doing inside? Why haven't they come out after so long? Those inside, hurry up. There are so many people waiting outside. The crowd was in an uproar for a long time before the manager came out again and said apologetically, "I'm really sorry, everyone. All the stock in this store, including a batch of goods that were urgently transferred from the neighboring province, have been bought by the previous customers." A shop assistant came out and placed a sign that read, "Sold out," at the entrance of the hall. There was a moment of silence in the crowd, followed by a monstrous uproar. "What is this? We came here before dawn to line up, and now you're telling me there's no stock." The shelves were full just now. There were only a few people in front, but they've all been bought out. Who are they trying to fool? Amidst the excitement of the crowd, someone moved the huge box out and onto a carriage that had been prepared in advance. "I know that man. Isn't he a steward of the Liu family?" Someone suddenly exclaimed. "That's impossible. The Liu family has their own clothing store. Why would they buy it here? What's impossible about that? If it were me, I'd do the same. Anyway, the things here are cheap. If we buy them and sell them at a higher price, we'll make a huge profit. The Liu family is so shameless." When did the Liu family stop being shameless? It was not difficult to guess the Liu clan's plan. The people who had woken up early to line up, only to be fooled in the end, felt indignant. However, due to the Liu clan's influence in Liuzhou, they did not dare to argue with them. They could only curse in their minds. Someone looked at the steward and complained, "Yesterday and a few days ago we had 5 pieces per person. If 5 is too little, you could have changed it to 10. Now the Liu family has taken all of them. What should we do now?" The steward comforted them and said, "Don't worry, everyone. Our store will release a new batch of ready-made clothing in the near future. By then, the price of the old clothes will be reduced by 60%. You're welcome to buy them." Although the crowd was still dissatisfied, they could only disperse after hearing the steward's explanation. Although they didn't manage to buy them today, they would be able to buy them at a slightly lower price in a few days, so their efforts wouldn't be in vain. They could only blame themselves for not coming earlier. Even if they had come 1 or 2 days earlier, they wouldn't have ended up like this. Of course, they also had to blame the black-hearted Liu family. In order to make money, they actually used such shameless means. Only a fool would buy clothes from the Liu family. However, the new ready-made clothing from the Lin family was worth looking forward to. The new ready-made clothing that hadn't been released yet, but Li Yi had already seen it. The style of the clothes was designed by him and Zue Mo together. After the first batch was produced, Rui, Zue Mo, Ruoqing, and Lin Wanru had personally tried them on. They were of various styles and styles which really made him feel addicted. Unfortunately, Rui didn't seem to be very interested in the new clothes. She usually wore plain clothes which hadn't changed over the years. As expected, the Liu family really bought a lot of goods. However, what they didn't know was that those were all old and outdated goods. The sales of their ready-made clothes had always been very good. These outdated goods were temporarily put together by countless stores in several states. If it was in a big city like the capital or Qing and prefecture, people with a little bit of status would be laughed at if they went out wearing such outdated clothes. Those goods used to be sold at 20% or 30% off, but now they could be sold at 50% off. They had to thank the Liu family for dumping them all at once. "This time I have to thank the Lin family." Lu Luo had a victorious smile on his face. Although the development of things had deviated from what he had imagined, he still felt some sense of achievement in his heart to be able to make the Lin family suffer such a hidden loss. The head of the Liu family walked in from outside. Lu Luo smiled. "Father? Don't call me father." The middle-aged man looked at him with a sullen face. The reputation and credibility that the Liu family has accumulated for hundreds of years were almost destroyed in your hands. This is all because of you. The smile on Lu Luo's face froze. What did I do? Tomorrow reduce the price of those goods you robbed by 20% and sell them cheaply. This way we can still save some of the reputation of the Liu family. The head of the Liu family looked at him with disappointment on his face. He waved his hand and said, "From today on, you don't have to worry about the business of the Liu family anymore." Lu Luo was shocked and anxious. "Father, why?" The head of the Liu family shook his head. "You are not suitable to do business. The one in the Lin family is much more powerful than you and I can imagine. No wonder the third prince is so protective of the Lin family. This time he even personally sent a letter to the provincial governor, asking him to take care of the business of the Lin family in Lu province." The third prince personally wrote a letter? After a while, Lu Luo's face turned pale and he slumped on the chair. The Lin family, Lin Wanru. He clenched his fists and gritted his teeth so hard that they almost broke. After a while, he stood up slowly and said in a hoarse voice, "Come, Brother Fong, when are you free? Teach me a few moves." In a shop, Lin Yong sat next to Fong. After thinking for a long time, he finally spoke. On the surface, the Liu family didn't seem to be doing anything. However, in the past few days, there had been people coming to the shop to make trouble. It was probably their last resort. He knew that he had some skills. However, after interacting with Fong recently, he deeply realized how big the gap between them was. Before Fong could answer, the shop suddenly became quiet. Lin Yong turned around and saw several people walking in. The person in the lead was an extremely tall and muscular man. He and old Fong were already tall and muscular enough, but this person was actually a head taller than the two of them and a size more muscular. If they were called big men, then this man could only be described as a giant. "Who is in charge here?" the giant man asked loudly as soon as he entered the shop. His voice was rough. Fong stepped forward and walked up to him saying, "I am." Fong was very tall, but standing next to the giant man he looked like a little bird. Of course he was the bird. The giant man looked down at him and said, "You should pay the shelter fee for this month." Fong looked at him and asked, "Shelter fee?" "Yes." The giant man continued to look down at him and said, "All the shops on this street have to pay this shelter fee every month if they want to operate safely. This is the rule. Didn't you ask about it when you opened the shop?" Fong looked up at him, thought for a moment and asked, "What if we don't pay?" "Don't pay?" The giant man sneered, grabbed his collar and slapped the shelf next to him. The shelf suddenly shook. The giant man looked at him and said in a cold tone, "Do you know that a person like you, I alone can, pa?" Fong also slapped the shelf. The shelf didn't shake much, but when he took his hand away, there was a handprint on the shelf. He looked up at the giant man and asked, "What can a person like me do?" Looking at the deep handprint on the shelf, the muscles on the giant man's face visibly twitched. "Big brother, which gang do you work in?" He let go of Fong's collar, gently helped him smooth the wrinkles on his clothes and said with a smile, "An expert like you can beat 10 of me." Chapter 11:21. The Liu family helped the Lin family clear the backlog of a few states, and the next day they sold them out at a very low price, almost as if they were free. It seemed to be more generous than the Lin family's promotion a few days ago. It showed that there were smart people in the Liu family. In fact, for a large clan like the Liu clan to be able to last for decades and even survive the change of dynasties, if they weren't smart enough, they would have long been swallowed up by others, not even their bones would be left. The Liu family was different from the Lin family. The Lin family was a pure business family, while the Liu family only dabbled in business to accumulate wealth and support the family to do more important things. Business was not the foundation of their family. It was normal for a big family to hand over the family business to a younger generation who was not the eldest son of the legal wife. This time they lost some money, but they won back their credibility. The money was nothing for the Liu family. The head of the Liu family came to the Lin mansion to apologize in person today. He said that everything that happened these days was made by Lu Luo alone and it didn't represent the position of the Lin family. He had punished Lu Luo severely and hoped that the Lin family wouldn't take it to heart. To show his sincerity, he also brought some expensive gifts. Li estimated that the value of those gifts was several times the loss of the Liu family this time. After the head of the Liu family left, Li was wondering whether all the big families in the Qi kingdom were so polite and kind. At this time, the provincial governor of Liuzhou came to visit. Although the provincial governor didn't bring any gifts, his attitude was better than that of the head of the Liu family. He said that if the Lin family encountered any difficulties in Liuzhou, they could just ask him. As the governor of Liuzhou, he would never let the Lin family suffer. Li Yi didn't believe that the head of the Lu family and the provincial governor came to show goodwill to the Lin family because they had nothing better to do. There must be some other reason. Lin Wanru walked over and sat opposite him. She said, "These years, almost every time the Lin family went to a province, it was like this. Every time we go to a province to expand our business, the third prince will personally write a letter to the provincial governor of that province. Among these people, there are people who are originally on the third prince's side, and there are also people who are not willing to offend him for these things. Thus, in the past few years, we have traveled all over the Qi kingdom without meeting any major obstacles." Lin Wanru looked at him and asked confusedly, "What did you say to the third prince when you left Fengzhou?" "Nothing," Li Yi said in surprise. "I just asked him to take care of the Lin family." These years, the third prince had done more than just take care of the Lin family. Lin Wanru stared at Li Yi. She didn't believe that the third prince would spare no effort to support the Lin family just because of what he said years ago. "Maybe it's because I helped him before." Seeing that Lin Wanru was looking at him, Li Yi thought for a while and said, "Once your first prince sent an envoy to the Jing kingdom, saying that he wanted to unite with our princess royal by marriage. The princess royal is very good at governing the country and is very important to the Jing kingdom. Of course I didn't agree. You also know that if Zhao Jing marries the Jing kingdom, the third prince will have no hope at all. I helped him indirectly that time. I think, maybe it's because of this reason." In detail, Li Yi and Zhao Yi weren't considered friends. Back then, Zhao Yi brought a group of subordinates to humiliate the Jing kingdom, but Li Yi returned the favor. However, not only did Li Yi not hate him, but he treated him with respect everywhere. This was a person who truly did great things. Zhao Yi was really a person with charisma. Even though they were enemies, Lin Wanru couldn't feel any hatred toward him. He had helped the Lin family so much and he had helped himself so much, but Lin Wanru couldn't do anything for him. To be honest, Li Yi felt a little guilty. Lin Wanru thought about what he said just now and suddenly asked, "Princess Royal is not only important to the Jing kingdom but also to you, ah?" Li Yi looked at him and was stunned for a moment. Then he said, "Yes, very important. We are best friends." Lin Wanru looked at him and suddenly asked, "Am I your friend?" Lin Yong was originally passing by the two of them, but when he heard these words he suddenly stopped in his tracks. Then he turned around and looked at him with worried eyes. Young Master Li's answer was simply not using his brain. If he answered yes, then Miss Lin and the Princess Royal of the Jing Kingdom were both his friends. He just said that the Princess Royal was his best friend. Didn't it mean that in his heart, Miss Lin was not as good as the Princess Royal? If Miss Lin was unhappy because of this, all the efforts he had made before would be in vain. If he answered no, it meant that he only regarded Miss Lin as a steward. Wouldn't Miss Lin be even angrier? He showed an extremely worried expression on his face. No. Li Yi shook his head decisively. Lin Yong was stunned and couldn't believe his ears. Lin Wanru's expression didn't change much. She looked at him and asked doubtfully, "Why? If it's a friend, it's not easy to make a move." Li Yi looked at him and thought for a moment. He asked, "If you can't get married in the future, will you really not consider living with me?" Lin Yong sighed and shook his head. He turned around and left. Brother Fong was right about one thing. It was something that was set in stone. He shouldn't worry about it. The young miss never asked others if they were friends. Brother Li was also very skilled in dealing with her. There was really no need for her to worry about the matter between the two of them. The only thing he was worried about was that although Li said it in a joking tone, Miss Rui was standing behind him. Would she be unhappy when she heard it? In fact, as soon as Li said that, he realized that he had made a mistake. He said that Emingzu was his best friend. If Lin Wanru asked him if she was his friend, he wouldn't be able to answer this question. He didn't expect that she would actually ask. Fortunately, Li Xian wasn't here. Otherwise things would be more troublesome. Fortunately, he was quick to react and used this half-joking, half-serious tone to resolve the awkwardness. As expected, a smile appeared on Miss Lin's face. Li Yi once again felt that he was very quick-witted. Lin Wanru looked behind Li Yi and smiled. Rui, Li Yi's expression froze. He only felt a chill on his back. There was no movement behind him for a long time. He finally breathed a sigh of relief. He thought that he was actually scared by such an old-fashioned trick. It was really, a pair of hands were placed on his shoulders, followed by Rui's pleasant voice. "Is it easy to lay hands on my wife's younger sister?" If I can't get married in the future, should I consider sleeping with you? It had been a long time since Li Yi had flipped a car. Since things had developed to this point, it was useless to be smart. He could only rely on his strong desire to survive. He stood up and walked in the direction of Lin Yong. He asked, "What did you want to discuss with me just now?" "Let's talk inside." "Nothing?" Lin Yong looked at him and said, "I have something to discuss with Fang." "I'll leave first." Lin Wanru stood up and walked over. She held Rui's arm and said, "I saw a set of clothes today. It suits you very well. I brought it back. Let's try it on in the room." Facts proved how important it was to have a qualified wingman in a battle. Some seemed to be wingmen, but in fact they were spies arranged by the opponent in their own camp. When you were up, down, left, and right, they would aim their machine guns at your engine. Li Yi decided to entrust Fang to educate Lin Yong. Fang had just pulled Lin Yong to sit down when someone walked in from outside and said loudly, "Lin Yong, where's Miss Lin?" Lin Yong turned around and looked at the fat man who walked in. He said in surprise, "Fatty Qian, why are you here?" "Don't mention it. My father asked me to come to Liuzhou to expand my business and learn more from Miss Lin," the fat man said. He looked at Li Yi with a trace of doubt on his face. He suddenly asked, "Brother, have we met somewhere before?" Li Yi turned to look at Lin Yong and asked, "Do you have a copper coin?" Although Lin Yong was surprised, he still searched his body and found a copper coin. Li Yi threw the copper coin to the fat man and said, "We're even." Chapter 11:22. Li Yi had a deep impression of this young man named Chen Duo. Ever since he came to this world he had only worried about money twice. The first time was when he first arrived at Willow Leaf Village. In order to feed his family he ran around every day and tried all kinds of methods. The second time was when he was in Fengzhou. Mississippi Lu was injured. They were penniless and needed tens of thousands of taels of silver to buy medicine. Fortunately they survived both crises safely. The first time was because he thought of many ways to make money, including selling paintings, candied fruits, and rui nectar. The second time was because he met the Boy of Wealth. The Boy of Wealth. If Chen Duo hadn't been so generous, he wouldn't have had so much money to buy those precious herbs. Mississippi Lu's illness wouldn't have recovered so quickly. Even though they had exchanged the goods and money at the time, Li Yi still owed him a copper coin in cash. He owed him for 5 years. He didn't like to owe favors, especially to men. He didn't like to owe money either. At first, Chen Duo only felt that the young man was familiar. Although he had never seen him before, he felt a sense of familiarity at first sight. It seemed that they had known each other for many years. Until he heard his voice, until he caught the coin. He finally understood that the person in front of him was the brother who had a great impact on his life and pulled him from the wrong path to the right path. In this life, there were two people who had a great impact on him. The first was his father, who had given birth to him and raised him. He had taught him how to be a qualified businessman. The second was the brother in front of him. He had helped him regain his confidence when he was at the lowest point of his life. He had helped him find the direction of his life. From then on he had stepped into a new world. He sat down opposite Li Yi and looked at the copper coin in his hand. He thought for a moment and suddenly asked, "Brother, have you heard of the saying 9 out and 13 back? In a pawn shop, the pawn shop would only pay 9 taels for an item worth 10 taels. 3 months later, the pawnbroker would have to pay 13 taels to redeem the item, which was called 13 return." What Chen Duo meant was that when he owed them, it was 1 copper coin. 5 years later, it would be more than 1 copper coin. Li Yi looked at him and asked, "Do you know what happens when a fatty falls from a building?" "Become what?" Chen Duo shook his head in confusion. "Damn fatty." After Li Yi explained it to him, he looked at Chen Duo again and asked, "Have you heard of the 9 out and 13 returns?" Chen Duo shook his head. "Never heard of it." The relationship between the Lin family and the Li family was only known to a limited number of people. However, the relationship between the Lin family and the Chen family was known to almost everyone in the Qi kingdom. It was not clear to outsiders whether the Lin family or the Chen family was wealthier. In any case, there were not many families that were wealthier than both of them. Starting from a small Feng state city, the Lin family and the Chen family had been supporting each other for the past few years. To be precise, when the Lin family was still a small family, the Chen family had started to use their family's resources to support the Lin family. Later on, the two families advanced side by side and benefited from each other. Step by step, They became the two giants in the business world of the Qi Kingdom. Feng State, where the Lin family was located, was Zhao Yi's territory. Back then, Li Yi had only asked him to take care of the Lin family. He did not expect him to be so honest. In just a few years he had pushed the Lin family to where they were today. The Qian family had contributed a lot to this. Li Yi had long heard from Lin Wanru that the Qian family had provided a lot of support to the Lin family from the beginning. The god of wealth, Qian, lived up to his reputation. 5 or 6 years ago, he had made his business the largest in Feng State. In recent years he had followed the third prince to the capital and made his business the largest in the Qi Kingdom. Even the current Lin family was not as rich as the Qian family. As the only son of the god of wealth, Qian Duo naturally attracted a lot of attention. However, what attracted the most attention was not the background of the Qian family, nor was it his extraordinary talent in business. It was the fact that every time he went to a place, the local scholars would tremble with fear. Some of the more famous ones would even avoid him and not appear within a 10-mile radius of him. On the contrary, the brothels all over the country were especially welcoming to him. This was not only because he was generous and often spent a lot of money, but also because he was acquainted with the legendary #1 scholar in the Jing Kingdom. This matter had become a common knowledge in the Qi Kingdom. Qian Duo had once become famous in the Qi Kingdom because of more than 10 excellent poems. Although it was later found out that those poems were written by someone else, this someone was not just any random person. He was the #1 scholar in the Jing Kingdom. His poems were not only widely spread in the Jing Kingdom, but also known by everyone in the Qi Kingdom. Zhao Xiuwen, the sage of poetry in the Qi Kingdom, once said bluntly in public, "Today there is only one stone. Li Yi alone has 8 stones. I have 1 stone and the whole world has 1 stone." Although the possibility of Zhao Xiuwen boasting after drinking could not be ruled out, for Zhao Xiuwen, who had always been extremely conceited about his talent, to say such words, it was clear to see how much he admired the #1 scholar in the Jing Kingdom. Moreover, almost every scholar in the Qi Kingdom had a copy of Li Yi's book of poems. Before someone could produce more poems than him and of better quality, no one had the right to refute Zhao Xiuwen's words. Of course, this had nothing to do with Qian Duo because his poems were all given to him by others. In the beginning many scholars expressed an extremely disdainful attitude towards this, labeling Qian Duo as a big idiot, a plagiarist, and shameless. Later on, for some unknown reason, no one dared to say such things. Now, in the hearts of scholars, Qian Duo was no less than a demon that could stop a child from crying at night. It was said that when a few famous scholars in Lu Province heard that he had arrived in Lu Province, they fled the state capital overnight and built a hut to live in. These were all things that Li Yi only found out later. In the end, Qian Duo did not dare to play the game of 9 out of 13 returns with him. He was discussing something with Lin Wanru on the other side. Lin Yong looked over there and after a moment he retracted his gaze, shook his head and said, "This young Master Qian is really strange." Fang also looked over there and said in surprise, "What's strange? Other than being a little fat, what's strange about him?" "You don't know." Lin Yong looked at him, shook his head and said, "At that time in Feng Province, young Master Qian had always been the target of ridicule by scholars. Everyone looked down on him and he could be said to be the joke of Feng Province City. Later on, I don't know what happened, but when those scholars saw him, they were like mice seeing a cat. When they walked, they would hide. His entire personality seemed to have changed. In the past, he hated scholars the most, but now, wherever there was a poetry meeting, wherever there was a scholar, he would go. Generally speaking, a person's personality wasn't the same, but it wasn't without reason that it would change at will. Suffering a major setback or encountering a major turning point in life would lead to a sudden change in personality. Or he met a life mentor who pointed out the direction of his life and lit a lamp to illuminate the road ahead. Li did not know why Qian Duo's personality had changed like this, but looking at him now, it was much better than being bullied and swallowing his anger. As for the sudden change in the scholar's attitude towards him, he did not know whether it was related to other things. In the early years, Lin Wanru would occasionally write to him, and she would mention some strange things in Feng Province City. For example, a famous scholar was found naked in the street in the morning, wearing only a crotch cloth. His nose was bruised and his face was swollen and his body was full of footprints. That was not all. During that time, the overall quality of the scholars in Feng Province City had declined. Almost every day, scholars who visited brothels and did not pay were caught in public at poetry meetings. It was not uncommon for scholars to abandon their wives and children, and their first wives and children came to find them. Even scholars with the highest quality were like this. In recent years, Zhao Yi only cared about fighting for the throne, and neglected the management of Feng province, running naked in the street, visiting brothels without paying, abandoning his wife and children, the moral degeneration of the world, the moral degeneration of the world. Chapter 11:23. The business of the Lin family and the Chen family were closely related in many ways. According to Chen Duoduo, the reason why he came to Liuzhou was that his father, the god of wealth Chen, felt that Miss Lin was very good at doing business and asked him to come over to learn some things. Chen Duoduo was the son of the god of wealth Chen, but he did not inherit the god of wealth Chen's ability to make money. Instead, he figured out a lot of his ability to spend money. Moreover, he was a very strange person. When he was generous, he would spend a lot of money without batting an eyelid. When he was stingy, he would remember a copper coin for 5 years and he still remembered Jiu Chen. 9 out, 13 back. Chen Duoduo and Lin Wanru talked for a while. When he walked over again, he suddenly stopped in front of Li Yi and bowed to him. Li Yi said in surprise, "What are you doing?" Chen Duoduo looked up at him and said seriously, "Brother Li has given me a new life. I deserve this bow." Fang and Lin Yong looked at him and then at Li Yi in surprise. Fang didn't know Chen Duoduo, but Lin Yong knew him a long time ago. However, he didn't know when the Li brothers had given him a new life. Li Yi waved his hand and said, "It's a small matter. You don't have to be so polite. It's a small matter for Brother Li, but it's a big matter for me." Chen Duoduo shook his head and said solemnly, "Brother Li once told me that money should be spent wisely. In the past, I spent 1,000 taels of silver, but I couldn't win the smile of the prostitutes in the brothel. Instead, I was laughed at by those poor scholars. Those years I was really bitter." Chen Duoduo's tone was sad. Speaking to this point, his tone changed and he said, "Later, after Brother Li's advice, every time I went to a place, I spent 100 taels of silver, and I could subdue all the idlers in the city. Whoever laughed at me, I let them beat them up. I spent another 100 taels of silver, and I could spread the news that they visited prostitutes without paying. I spent another 100 taels of silver, and the whole city knew that they didn't pay for prostitution. I spent another." Stop. Seeing Chen Duoduo's spittle flying, Fang and Lin Yong's eyes began to change. Even Lin Wanru came over. Li Yi hurriedly reached out and stopped him from continuing. If he allowed him to continue slandering him out of thin air, his lifelong reputation would be ruined in a day. At that time, how old Fang and Lin Yong would think of him wasn't important. How did Miss Lin see him? Her impression of him had worsened. What if he couldn't make a move against her in the future? Chen Duoduo didn't continue. He bowed to him again and said, "I've always wanted to say thank you to Brother Li in person. I've finally waited for you today." To Li Chiu, but to him, Chen Duoduo, this was the light that tore open the darkness, and it established a new direction for his life. It allowed him to be reborn, to hold his head high, and to become a new man. Kindness was akin to giving him a new lease on life. Lin Wanru looked at Li Yi with interest, as if she was getting to know him all over again. Li Yi took a deep breath, looked at Chen Duoduo and changed the topic. "You said you just came from the capital. How is the situation in the capital? Is the third prince doing well?" "The third prince has always been good." Chen Duoduo nodded and said, "Regarding how to deal with those sanctimonious so-called scholars, I have accumulated some experience in the past few years and have many new ideas. Brother Li, do you want to hear them?" "No, I'm not interested." Li Yi shook his head and said, "Why don't you tell me the situation in the capital in detail? How is the fight between the third prince and the first prince going?" Chen Duoduo was very regretful. He was very experienced in dealing with those sanctimonious beasts in human clothing. Brother Li was clearly his bosom friend, his guide, but he had to say these words that went against his heart. He could only sigh and say, "The third prince and the first prince should be evenly matched right now." The information that Li Yi got from others was naturally not as good as Zhao Yi's. Although the god of wealth Chen was not an official, Zhao Yi had countless counselors around him, but no one could replace the god of wealth Chen. He was Zhao Yi's god of wealth. Whether it was governing the country or rebelling, he could have no one by his side, but it was impossible for him to have no god of wealth Chen. Even Li Yi admired Zhao Yi's accuracy in judging people. Not only was he accurate, but he was also good at using people. He could use his charisma to make those people loyal to him. Since ancient times, those who achieved great things all had this quality. Although Li Xian was the emperor of the Jing kingdom and the master of the most powerful country in the surrounding area, he was far behind Zhao Yi in terms of personal ability, governing the country and using people. However, Li Xian also had his charisma. His charisma was foolishness. This kind of foolishness was fully revealed when he broke into the king of Shu's mansion alone and slapped Qin Yu in the face, and when he violently beat up the king of Shu with him in front of the civil and military officials. However, a fool had a fool's luck. Therefore his life was smooth and he easily reached the peak of his life. Compared to a smart person like Zhao Yi, Li Yi preferred the foolish Li Xian. Zhao Yi was indeed very capable. This ability was shown when he was young. He managed the remote Feng province into a prosperous place second only to the capital of the Qi kingdom. He had countless talents around him. Although he was not the crown prince, he had won the support of more than half of the officials in the imperial court. He could compete with the crown prince for the supreme position. It could be said that the current him was the most dazzling star in the night sky of the Qi kingdom. Most of the younger officials in the imperial court and officialdom of the Qi kingdom had been recruited by Zhao Yi. Due to several incidents, the first prince had lost the support of the people. However, the crown prince was still the crown prince. He still gathered a group of conservative old officials around him. Although the number of people was smaller, each of them held a high position and held great power. Their influence was more or less balanced with the third prince's. Nowadays, the emperor of the Qi kingdom was no longer involved in the affairs of the imperial court. The first prince was in charge of the affairs of the imperial court while the third prince exercised the power of supervision. Both sides competed with each other. Whenever one side lost its balance, the emperor of the Qi kingdom would step in and intervene until the balance was restored. When Li Yi learned about these things from Chen Duoduo, he had a rough idea of the emperor of the Qi kingdom's thoughts. The emperor was balancing the powers in the imperial court. As long as one side was too powerful, the emperor might not live to the day he died of old age. He was also sharpening his blade. It did not matter whether Zhao Yi was the blade or Zhao Zheng was the blade. Both of them had scruples. Only when they had scruples could they grow. From the standpoint of the entire Qi kingdom, no matter who became the emperor in the end, their growth would be beneficial to the Qi kingdom. This was different from the former emperor. The former emperor would personally sweep away all obstacles for Li Xian, stabilizing the country and intimidating foreign enemies. Then he would hand over this great land to him in one piece. As for the former emperor himself, he would not be able to see the empire he had conquered. The emperor of the Qi kingdom was a successful emperor. So was the former emperor. Under his leadership, the power of the Jing kingdom had reached the pinnacle since the founding of the kingdom. The prosperous era under the rule of Li Xian was just a continuation of the previous prosperous era. However, unlike the emperor of the Qi kingdom, the former emperor was not only a good emperor, but also a good father. If things were really as Li Yi had predicted, the balanced situation in the Qi kingdom, barring any accidents, such as the sudden death of the emperor of the Qi kingdom, Zhao Yi's rebellion or Zhao Zheng's rebellion, would still be maintained for a long time. At the side, Chen Duoduo turned to look at Lin Wanru and said, "Sister Wanru, please teach me a few more tricks to do business. Otherwise, if my father asks about it, I won't be able to answer to him." Lin Wanru smiled and pointed at Li Yi. She said, "You should ask your brother Li. He knows more than I do. He definitely won't let you down." Miss Lin had been spending all her time learning from Mississippi Lu recently on how to become a young fairy. Naturally, she had no time to teach Chen Duoduo. They were all friends. When a friend was in trouble, Chen Duoduo would be willing to sacrifice himself, much less stand up for him. Li Yi looked at Chen Duoduo and said, "In this world there are actually many things that are common. Whether it's doing business, going to war, or fighting for the throne, there are many things in common that can be learned from. Let's take the third prince and the eldest prince's fight for the throne as an example." 2 hours later, Li Yi looked at him and said, "Conspiring and sowing discord. These methods can not only be used in the fight for the throne. In fact, with a little flexibility, they can also be used in the battle for business." Hearing this, Chen Duoduo was startled. He said, "The third prince and the eldest prince didn't use these methods in the fight for the throne." Li Yi was startled. He waved his hand and said, they didn't use them." Chen Duoduo nodded and said, "It's a pity. If they had used them, I would be able to answer to my father when I return." Li Yi looked at him for a long time. He sighed and said, "Duoduo?" Chen Duoduo raised his head and looked at him. "Let's not talk about doing business or fighting for the throne." Li Yi shook his head and said, "Tell me, what good methods do you have to deal with those sanctimonious beasts in human clothing?" Hearing this, Chen Duoduo immediately became excited. Let me tell you. Chapter 11:24. In fact, Li Yi was not good at being a teacher, not at all. Whether in Willow Village or in the Imperial Palace, he taught those children, the Pope, the Princess, and the Pope with a playful attitude. Apart from Chen Duoduo, the only person who could make him break down knowledge and feed it to him bit by bit was Li Han. Li Han was now the dean of the College of Mathematics in the Jing Kingdom. He had full power and was envied by all the princes. Chen Duoduo was now the leader of the Qi Kingdom. Qi Kingdom, the Qi Kingdom's anti-scholars alliance. Although he was the only one in this alliance, he could make all the fake scholars in the Qi Kingdom turn pale at the mention of Chen Duoduo's name. In terms of achievements, he was not inferior to Li Han. If he wrote a book named 99 Ways to Deal with a Hypocrite, How to Slap a Hypocrite in the Face, and 100 Ways to Slap a Face of the Chen family, it might sell well in the Qi Kingdom and Jing Kingdom. However, his achievements were not in the business world or the imperial court. His achievements were in slapping people's faces. In this aspect he had surpassed his master. Li Yi really could not teach him anything. After understanding the situation in the capital of the Qi Kingdom, this was the only thing he could do for him and the third prince. Chen Duoduo, on the other hand, wanted to stay here for a few more days. Over the past few days he seemed to have understood something from his conversation with Li Yi, but at the same time he seemed to have understood nothing at all. Perhaps after a few more days of conversation, that layer of window paper would be revealed. However, if he did not go back, he would have to stay in Liuzhou for the new year this year. His father, the god of wealth, once set a rule that no matter how big the business of the Chen family was, no matter how busy they were, they had to go home for the new year. Since he was very young, his father did not accompany him. He was always traveling outside and sometimes he could not see his father for several months. However, every New Year's Eve, the Lantern Festival, the Mid-Autumn Festival, and the Double Ninth Festival, his father would always appear without exception. Both his parents were in the capital. If he did not go back before the new year, his father would definitely break his legs. Brother Li, Sister Wanru, goodbye. Chen Duoduo sat in the carriage and waved to the back with a look of reluctance. He didn't have many friends and he didn't have any like-minded friends. Those people surrounded him either for his money or for his money. For this reason he didn't know how many people flattered him. Listening to them made him feel a little nauseous. His appetite was greatly reduced and he hadn't put on weight for several years. Li Yi casually waved his hand and walked back to the courtyard. After communicating with Chen Duoduo in depth, he realized that there really were people in this world who were even more foolish than Li Xian. This time he might have really wasted his breath. It was almost New Year's Day. Ruoqing was already a few months pregnant and her pregnancy was starting to show. Zuiamo supported her and paced in the courtyard. Li Duan could already pull Li Mu to play on the swing with him. With Yong Ning by his side to protect him, there would be no accidents. Lin Wanru also spent New Year's Day in Liuzhou this year. A long time ago the Lin family didn't care about her at all. In these years, even during New Year's Day, she was still traveling outside to expand her business. This was the third year after the change of the era of the Jing Kingdom. It had been more than 3 years since Li Yi returned to the Jing Kingdom. It was the 4th year of Jing Ping. No matter what, it was time for the family to reunite. Qi Kingdom, the capital, the Chen family. The capital was the most prosperous place in the Qi Kingdom. God knew how many powerful families lived in it. They could stir up the entire Qi Kingdom with a single move. The Chen family might not be the most powerful family in the Qi Kingdom, but they were the richest. No clan was rich enough to place 2 pure gold lions in front of their house. Other clans were rich enough to hide their wealth, but the Chen clan clearly told everyone that the Chen clan was very rich, very rich. In the capital, such a showy family usually didn't have a good end. But the Chen family didn't seem to care at all. When there were disasters in other provinces, the Chen family donated the most money and often gave porridge and rice. Their good reputation spread throughout the capital. In recent years, not only were they not suppressed, but the gold lions in front of their house were getting bigger and bigger. When Chen Duoduo stepped into the house, he heard a dissatisfied voice. The god of fortune Chen walked out of the hall with a big belly and glanced at him. You still know to come back? It's New Year's Eve in 2 days. Chen Duoduo walked over and said, I'm learning how to do business from Sister Wanru. I accidentally delayed it. The god of fortune Chen snorted. If you have half of Miss Lin's ability, I can die in peace now. Chen Duoduo hurriedly said, Father, don't die so early. Otherwise, the Chen family's wealth will be squandered by me sooner or later. When the god of fortune Chen picked up the broom in the yard, Chen Duoduo had already run away. The god of fortune Chen pointed at Chen Duoduo's back and scolded, "Bastard, if you are enlightened, marry a wife, have a son, and leave the Chen family descendants. It doesn't matter if I die now." "What's the matter, god of fortune? Why are you so angry?" A voice came from the door. The god of fortune Chen looked back and said, "What kind of wind blew today that blew you two here again?" Yang Yanzhou and Zhao Xiuwen cupped their hands to him at the same time and said, "Let's talk inside. Father, the tea is here." Chen Duoduo came over with a few cups of tea and turned to leave. "Stop." The god of fortune Chen glanced at him and said, "If I die, the Chen family will be handed over to you. You just stand here and listen. Learn more from the two adults." Chen Duoduo scratched his head. "Father, didn't you not let me learn from those scholars? You said that they only rely on their words and have no ability. Sister Wanru alone is worth thousands of them. Shut up." The god of fortune Chen glared at him, looked at the two people in front of him and said, "What orders does the third prince have this time?" Yang Yanzhou and Zhao Xiuwen's expressions were calm. They were used to this young Master Chen talking like this. When it came to making money from doing business, the two of them added up. Thousands of them might not be as good as the god of fortune Chen and Miss Lin. Although the entire Qi kingdom only had one Miss Lin, they still couldn't refute it. Zhao Xiuwen coughed lightly and said, "It's like this. Recently, when His Highness sent people to check the accounts of the Ministry of Revenue, he found some problems in some places. He suspected that the accounts of the Ministry of Revenue had been tampered with. However, the method of the person who made the accounts was really clever. His Highness sent people to check several times, but they didn't find any more clues." Yang Yanzhou continued, "It's certain that there is a problem with the accounts of the Ministry of Revenue. They are so careful to hide it. There must be a bigger problem. The minister of the Ministry of Revenue is the Crown Prince's man. If we can take this opportunity to bring him down, it will be like cutting off one of the Crown Prince's arms. If we can take this opportunity to help our people get promoted, it will be of great help to His Highness." The god of fortune Chen looked at them and asked, "You want me to help check the accounts?" Yang Yanzhou and Zhao Xiuwen nodded at the same time. The god of fortune has a discerning eye. Anything related to money, no matter how strange it is, can't escape your eyes. "I got it." The god of fortune Chen nodded and said, "Now His Highness and the Crown Prince are evenly matched. The courtiers on the Crown Prince's side are deeply trusted by him and are loyal to him. It is impossible for them to be used by me. Every time one of them is removed, their power will be weakened. The position of the Minister of Revenue is special. If..." As the god of fortune Chen spoke, he glanced at Chen Duoduo, who was next to him, tilted his head and curled his lips. He was still talking to himself. It seemed that he was quite disdainful of this. He was angry and said angrily, "What are you talking about? Come on, I won't say it. You say it." Chen Duoduo was stunned. "What did I say?" "You don't know anything. Why don't you listen to me?" The god of fortune Chen couldn't help but kick his butt. "Do you think that it is enough to do business? There are many ways to do it. You don't know anything about the affairs of the court. How can I trust you to take care of the Chen family? Father, why don't you understand this truth?" Chen Duoduo shook his head and said, "In this world, in fact, many things are common. Doing business, fighting, or fighting for the throne, there are many common points that can be used for reference. Take the third prince and the first prince fighting for the throne as an example. In fact, this is the same as doing business. Isn't it just robbing people from each other? It is not so difficult." When Chen Duoduo said this, his tone suddenly paused. He waved his hand and said, "Why am I saying this?" "You continue. I will listen carefully." Chapter 11:25. Isn't it just robbing each other? How can it be so difficult? Money God looked at Chen Duoduo. There was such an idiot beside him, which made him a little sad. What made him even sadder was that this idiot was his son. In the battle for the throne, not only did the civil and military officials in the court have to take sides, but the third prince and the eldest prince also had to try their best to win over the courtiers and strengthen their own forces. In the past few years, both sides had tried their best to suppress their opponents and strengthen themselves. The first prince had instigated many of the third prince's subordinates to rebel, and the third prince had also dragged many of the first prince's subordinates into the water. Now the two sides were almost in a stalemate. Every step forward was exceptionally difficult. The third prince had countless counselors under his command, but they had not been able to expand the advantage. How could Chen Duoduo speak such arrogant words? Money God was so angry that he laughed. He stood up from his seat, pointed to the chair and said to Chen Duoduo, "You sit down." Chen Duoduo hurriedly said, "I am not tired." "You sit down, you sit down." Money God took off a shoe, held it in his hand and said impatiently, "Don't talk nonsense. Just sit down." Chen Duoduo hurriedly sat down. If he didn't sit down this time, his father would beat him with the sole of his shoe. It doesn't matter if you don't understand at such a young age, but it is taboo to speak such arrogant words. Money God looked at him and said, "Tell me, how is the battle for the throne the same as doing business?" Chen Duoduo looked bitter. "I just said it casually." Money God looked at him and patted the sole of his shoe in his hand. "What you were talking about just now was how to rope in the first prince's subordinates or make them fall into chaos, right?" Chen Duoduo immediately said, "Father, think about it. A few years ago you took a fancy to the steward of the Wan family. How did you trick him into coming over?" "You mean the steward of the Wan family?" Money God thought for a moment and said, "Can that be called cheating?" His talent was buried in the Wan family, and he only received a few hundred taels of silver a year. I bought him a house with 3 entrances in the capital for 10,000 taels of silver a year. Why didn't he follow me? That's right. Chen Duoduo patted his thigh and said, "We can also buy a few houses in a good location in the capital." Hearing this, Yang Yanzhou and Zhao Xiuwen both shook their heads. Even young Master Chen could think of a method. How could they not think of it? This was because, in this world, not everything could be done with money. Both sides tried to use this method to bribe the other party's officials, but the results were minimal. After all, this was a fight for the throne. One wrong step could lead to a bottomless abyss. No one dared to bet the lives of their entire family on a house. "That's all you want to say?" Money God of Fortune slapped the soles of his shoes faster. He narrowed his eyes and asked, "What if they don't accept it?" "What do you mean?" Chen Duoduo looked at him in surprise and said, "I mean the price of houses in the capital has been rising. If you buy it now, you definitely won't suffer a loss." Money God narrowed his eyes and said, "Do you think I don't know that houses in the capital will rise? What I mean is..." Seeing that the sole of the shoe was getting closer and closer to his face, Chen Duoduo hurriedly said, "We can buy a few houses and hang Lu residence, Chen residence, Ma residence, and so on. This is our Chen family's house. Why would we hang other people's names on it? Wait for the appreciation." Breathing heavily, Money God of Fortune raised the shoe in his hand and slapped it toward Chen Duoduo's head. Halfway through he suddenly stopped. He seemed to have thought of something and murmured, "Lu residence, Chen residence, Ma residence?" He put on the shoe and looked at Chen Duoduo, making the latter feel creeped out. He reached out and pulled Chen Duoduo's face. Chen Duoduo shivered and said, "Father, what are you doing? I want to see if you are my son." Money God of Fortune reached out and pulled his face, saying, "No mask. Are you bewitched?" Yang Yanzhou looked at him in confusion. Money God of Fortune. Money God of Fortune moved another chair over, looked at Chen Duoduo and said, "Tell me." They looked at Chen Duoduo again. "You scholars, how can you be so stubborn?" Chen Duoduo frowned, looked at him and said, "Did you send someone to bribe the great prince's people?" There was nothing to deny, so Yang Yanzhou nodded. Chen Duoduo asked, "Did you succeed?" "Failed." "Why did you fail?" "They didn't accept it." "If they don't accept it, you won't give it to them?" Chen Duoduo looked at the two with disappointment and asked, "Where is your sincerity?" "Yang Yanzhou, Zhao Xiuwen, let me say it. If these two died of anger in the Chen manner, he couldn't explain it to the third prince." Money God of Fortune waved his hand and said, "What Duoduo means is that our Chen family will pay to buy a few mansions in the capital and hang the names of the great prince's officials. It doesn't matter if they accept it or not, they will give it to us." Sowing discord? Yang Yanzhou frowned and said, "Will the great prince believe such groundless things?" Chen Duoduo thought about it, looked at him and said, "Lord Yang, yesterday I accidentally saw Madame Yang and a strange man kissing in a small forest outside the city." Yang Yanzhou suddenly slammed the table, looked at him and said angrily, "My wife and I were at home all day yesterday. Don't you dare spread rumors." Chen Duoduo asked, "When did you not stay all day?" "The day before yesterday my wife went back to her parents' home." Chen Duoduo slapped his thigh and said, "Look at my memory. I'm sorry, I remembered wrong. It was the day before yesterday." "You." Yang Yanzhou glared at him but was pulled back by Zhao Xiuwen. Zhao Xiaowen was stunned. He looked at Chen Duoduo as if it was the first time he had met him. Yang Yanzhou was also a smart man. He had only been impulsive after hearing those filthy words. After calming down, he immediately understood the crux of the matter. Before this, the two sides had tried to rope each other in and instigate defection. Who knew how much money had been promised, but they had not made much progress. Chen Duoduo's words today had provided them with another way of thinking. If they could not bring those people under their command, then let them create chaos from within. However, they had tried to sow discord between the great prince and his officials, but it had little effect. After all, no one was a fool and would not fall for those clumsy schemes. Yang Yanzhou was still somewhat depressed and asked, "What if the great prince does not believe it?" "It's up to you whether you believe it or not." Chen Duoduo pursed his lips and said, "In any case, buying a house will not be a loss. I can hang the name of whoever I want in my house. It's fine even if I don't hang my name. When the time comes, we will send our imperial censors to visit the homes of those officials often, drink tea, and investigate whether they appear honest on the surface but are secretly extravagant and lascivious." This time, not only did Yang Yanzhou and Zhao Xiaowen look at him differently, but even the god of fortune looked at him with a strange gaze. The third prince was in charge of supervision. More than half of the imperial censors in the court were their people. If these censors visited the homes of the great prince's officials every few days, the great prince would not be able to sleep well. They also could not keep the censors out of the door. Even the great prince did not dare to do so. If he did, it would be revealing that he had a guilty conscience. A smile appeared on Zhao Xiaowen's face. He clapped his hands and said, "What a good way to sow discord." Chen Duoduo looked at him contemptuously and said, "Where have you scholars gone? You can't even think of this. Have you read Plum's Art of War? Have you read the 36 Stratagems?" Zhao Xiaowen suddenly looked at him and asked, "These two books only exist in the Jing Kingdom's military. It's rare for outsiders to see them. Have you seen them before?" Chen Duoduo patted his chest and said, 100,000 taels of silver. I'll lend it to you for 3 days. No bargaining." Zhao Xiaowen and Yang Yanzhou hurriedly left. It was unknown if they really had something urgent to attend to, or if they were frightened by the 100,000 taels of silver. Money God of Fortune squinted at Chen Duoduo and asked, "Tell me honestly, who taught you this?" Thinking of Li Yi's reminder, Chen Duoduo looked at him and said sincerely, "Dad, I won't hide it from you. Actually, one day I suddenly had a flash of inspiration, and then these things appeared." The plan he had just described was almost tailor-made for the third prince. The god of wealth knew his son very well. If he didn't have a master behind him, then he was possessed by a ghost. From the looks of it now, it was the latter. "Tie the young master up for me." Money God of Wealth waved his hand and said to the two servants at the door, "Take him to the Chen family's ancestral hall and invite some monks and Taoists over." He looked at Chen Duoduo, who was stunned on the spot, and said with a guilty expression, "Duoduo, I'm sorry. If I didn't let you go out, you wouldn't have been possessed by a ghost." Chapter 11:26. Prince Heng's Residence. The first prince, Zhao Zheng, was pacing back and forth in the hall with a gloomy expression. An old man walked in from outside the hall. Zhao Zheng raised his head and asked, "Have Zhao Yi's men been visiting us frequently these days?" The old man nodded and said, "It's the new year. In order to put an end to the extravagance and debauchery in the capital, it's normal for the censors to visit us frequently." "Normal?" Zhao Zheng snorted and said, "If it's normal, why do they only pay attention to Ai's men?" The old man was startled and asked, "Your Highness, you mean?" Zhao Zheng looked at him and asked, "I heard that Zhao Yi's subordinate, the god of wealth Qian, has bought a few more manors in the capital?" The conflict between the third prince and the first prince had reached an irreconcilable level. They would naturally pay more attention to the important figures around the third prince. The old man nodded and said, "The Qian clan already has several manors in the capital. It's a bit sudden for them to buy these manors for no reason. I have already asked the previous owners of those manors in secret. According to them, the god of wealth Chen was interested in the value of those manors and concluded that they would increase in the short term. They were in a hurry to use the money and sold the manors after a few days." "Increase?" Zhao Jing raised his voice and said, "I think it's a cover-up." "Your Highness, you mean?" The old man was startled and then shook his head and said, "Your Highness, you should trust those lords. They are loyal to your Highness and would never be tempted by money to betray your Highness." "Of course I know." Zhao Jing waved his hand and said, I'm afraid this is another trap set by Zhao Yi. He is crafty. If I suspect the lords, won't I be playing into his hands? I'm not that stupid. He sneered and said, prepare a few generous gifts and send them to the manors of those lords. Your Highness is wise. The old man cupped his hands and slowly retreated. Zhao Jing walked around the hall for a while before returning to the table and sitting down. A trace of doubt appeared on his face again. Later on, I thought that it would be better if we don't hang any plaques on those residences. We can't be too deliberate. We should let the crown prince guess for himself. In the Chen estate, Chen Duoduo looked at the people below and spoke with fervor and assurance. The third imperial prince is broad-minded. This method is useless against the third imperial prince, but the first imperial prince is narrow-minded. After this incident, even if he doesn't seem to care on the surface, and even if he tries to cover it up and show kindness to those few clans, a seed of doubt will surely be planted in his heart. As long as we persevere, water it diligently and loosen the soil, the seed of doubt in his heart will grow into a towering tree. When the first prince no longer trusts them, that will be the time to test everyone. I don't think I need to teach you how to win them over to the third prince's side, right? That was the end of Chen Duoduo's small class. When everyone left, they cupped their hands to the god of wealth. Young Master Chen is wise. Brother God of Wealth has a successor. If this plan can succeed, the balance between the crown prince and the third imperial prince in the court will be completely broken. At that time, the advantage of the crown prince's identity will be gone. Congratulations to the third imperial prince first. After everyone left, the god of wealth looked at Chen Duoduo, who was holding the teapot and drinking, and said, how can you be so sure that the first imperial prince won't trust them? Chen Duoduo smiled mysteriously. I have my own brilliant plan. The god of wealth narrowed his eyes and silently took off his shoes. Brilliant plan? Brilliant plan? Who gave you the right to call me a brilliant plan? Who asked you to keep me guessing in front of me? After he felt better, the god of wealth put on his shoes, looked at him and said, what else is in your stomach? Pour it out together. Chen Duoduo shrank in the corner, covered his head and whispered, Father, this is not evil. This is a scheme, a scheme. The god of wealth silently took off his shoes again. After a while, the god of wealth touched the short beard on his chin and fell into deep thought. Chen Duoduo looked proud and said, Father, what do you think of my method? He was indeed proud in his heart. Although these methods were taught to him by Brother Li, what Brother Li taught him was the strategy used in the business world. After he drew inferences and made multiple associations, it could also be used in the fight for power in the imperial court. At least half of it was his painstaking effort. The god of wealth looked at him, turned around and walked out of the door. He ordered his servants, invite more monks and Taoists. The Ministry of Revenue, one of the 6 ministries of the imperial court, was in charge of money and grain. Among the 6 ministries, although the Ministry of Rights was the head, the Ministry of Rights had no power. The Ministry of Personnel, which was in charge of the officials of the world, and the Ministry of Revenue, which was in charge of money and grain, were the 2 most powerful departments in the 6 ministries. The Minister of Revenue, Cui Jiang, was quite worried recently. It was not because of the mistakes in the work of the Ministry of Revenue, nor was it because the first imperial prince was at a disadvantage in the struggle for power with the third imperial prince. What he was worried about was that during the new year, several imperial censors from the censorate would come to his manor to drink tea every few days. They practically treated the Cui manor as their second yamen. Although the Ministry of Revenue was the most profitable yamen in the imperial court, everything had to have evidence. He could not be guarded against like a thief just because he was in charge of the Ministry of Revenue. These days he had to eat fewer dishes at home because he was afraid that the imperial censors would see him and say that he, Cui Jiang, was extravagant and had embezzled money from the national treasury for personal use. It was impossible to reason with these imperial censors. If he did not let them in, it would be like he had a guilty conscience. It was very likely that they would bring the imperial guards with them next time. Let them in. Who didn't know that he, Cui Jiang, was the first prince's man? The imperial censorate was practically the third prince's backyard. People who didn't know better would think that he, Cui Jiang, had betrayed the first prince and was in cahoots with these people. Fortunately, the first imperial prince's eyes were like torches. Not only did he not blame him, but he also sent a generous gift, which made Cui Jiang feel relieved. On this day, Cui Jiang was drinking tea in the manor when a housekeeper walked in. He looked at him and said, "Sir, those imperial censors are here again." Cui Jiang had not even finished drinking his tea when he spat it all out. Was there an end to it? Was there an end to it? Cui Jiang stood up angrily. With a face full of anger, he strode out of the room. As he walked out, the anger on his face melted like ice. He cupped his hands to the people in front of him and said, "Sirs, have you had breakfast? Do you want to eat together?" One of them cupped his hands to him and said, "Sir Cui is too polite. This time we have come to discuss something with Sir Cui." Cui Jiang smiled and said, "Sirs, please come in and discuss in detail." The few people walked into the hall. One of the imperial censors looked outside and said, "Bring them in." A few servants immediately brought in 2 large boxes and placed them on the ground, making a heavy sound. They wiped the sweat from their foreheads and let out a long sigh before bowing and saying their goodbyes. Cui Jiang revealed a puzzled expression and asked, "This is?" The imperial censor looked at him and said, "Sir Cui is a smart person. This official will not beat around the bush. As long as Sir Cui is willing to pledge loyalty to the third prince, Sir Cui will accept these 2 boxes of gold today." Cui Jiang's expression changed and his voice immediately became cold. "What do you mean by this?" The man smiled slightly. "Sir Cui is a smart person and understands what this official means." Cui Jiang sneered, "This official is loyal to His Majesty and also to His Royal Highness the Crown Prince. When you go back, please pass this message to the third prince. If the third prince becomes the Crown Prince, even without these boxes, this official will still be loyal to him." The imperial censor's expression darkened. "Sir Cui really won't accept it?" Cui Jiang's attitude was firm. "No." The imperial censor looked at him and suddenly smiled. He waved his hand and said, "Open it." The 2 people behind him opened the boxes. Cui Jiang's eyes glanced inside and his expression froze. There was no gold in the boxes, it was clearly 2 huge stones. The imperial censor smiled and cupped his hands. "Sir Cui is in a high position and is not tempted by money. You are truly a role model for our generation. I admire you, admire you." Cui Jiang's eyes were filled with confusion. "What do you mean by this?" Being in the imperial court, one cannot do as they please. Everyone has their own master and there is nothing wrong with that. We only received an anonymous report saying that Sir Cui likes to accept bribes and is using his position for personal gain. The imperial censor looked at him and then at the people behind him and smiled. "Look, he is not tempted by such a large amount of money. This is enough to prove that Sir Cui is an honest official. In the future, do not listen to rumors and slander a loyal official." The people behind him immediately bowed and said, "This lowly official understands. I hope Sir Cui will not take offense at our intrusion." While Cui Jiang was still confused, the imperial censor looked at him and smiled. "It is not convenient to move these stones around. Just leave them here, Sir Cui will have someone take care of them." The people left just like that. Cui Jiang stood in the hall and looked at the 2 boxes with the stones. He waved his hand and said impatiently, "Ridiculous." Chapter 11:27. The people of the censorate were a bunch of lunatics. In the eyes of the officials of the Qi kingdom, they were a bunch of psychopaths who had been repressed for too long. They kept an eye on the officials at all times, waiting for them to make mistakes. Even the most trivial matters were worth making a big fuss about. There was once when Cui Jiang couldn't help but let out a fart during the morning court session, and a certain censor pointed it out mercilessly in front of the officials. Cui Jiang was embarrassed on the spot, but this wasn't the worst part. The most outrageous thing was that in order to catch the officials where it hurt, they would stop at nothing. They would even secretly send people to deliver gifts. Once an official accepted a bribe, there would be people from the Department of Investigations knocking on the door in the middle of the night and inviting them to the Supreme Court for tea. Cui Jiang was already familiar with this kind of routine. Even if the other party gave him real money, he wouldn't waver, let alone stones. Although he vaguely felt that something was wrong, he couldn't say what it was, so he could only let it go. He pointed at the 2 large chests in the hall and ordered, "Come, take these things out and throw them away, Chen Estate." Yang Yanzhou looked at Chen Duoduo and asked, "What did you have those censors give to official Cui?" "Stones," Chen Duoduo replied. "Stones?" Yang Yanzhou looked at him and frowned. "This is a serious matter. I hope that young Master Chen won't fool me." They came into the Cui estate with great fanfare just to deliver 2 chests of stones. Who would believe them? Yes, who would believe them? Chen Duoduo sighed. "But we really did deliver stones. Don't you think we're wronged, Hung Estate?" Zhao Yi's people carried 2 very heavy chests into the Cui estate. Zhao Zheng looked at the elder and asked, When did this happen? The elder looked at him and said, Yesterday. Zhao Zheng's expression was unreadable. After a moment, he waved his hand and said, Go call Cui Jiang over. Before long, Zhao Zheng looked at Minister of Revenue Cui Jiang, who had hurried over. He said, These days the censors have visited the Cui estate many times. You must have suffered. Cui Jiang hurriedly said, This lowly official does not feel wronged at all working for His Highness. Zhao Zheng smiled and asked, I heard that yesterday a few imperial censors carried 2 boxes into the Cui residence. What are they? Cui Jiang hurriedly said, It's just 2 boxes of stones. Rock. Cui Jiang bowed and said, Yes, those people said that they wanted to test this official, so they used 2 boxes of stones to pass off as gold and silver, asking this official to pledge allegiance to the 3rd prince. This official has already refused. Sure too, are you testing me? Zhao Zheng looked at him and a smile appeared on his face. Ah, I understand. You can leave now. This lowly official shall take his leave. Cui Jiang raised his head and looked at him. He felt apprehensive as he slowly retreated. Stone. Zhao Zheng watched him walk out, and the smile on his face gradually disappeared, becoming gloomy. Hee, what a good stone, what a good test. The eldest prince summoned him urgently. Cui Jiang nervously entered the Heng prince's residence. After being asked a few questions, he retreated. It seemed that nothing had happened, but in his heart, he felt even more apprehensive. After returning to the Cui residence, he felt even more uneasy. Bang. He walked with his head down and suddenly bumped into someone. He was already upset and was about to curse, but when he saw the person who had been knocked down, he immediately stepped forward and helped him up. He looked at the woman and complained, Madam, why don't you look where you're going when you walk? What's wrong with Master? The woman looked at him and said, Just now, I saw Master walking with his head down from afar and called out to Master a few times. Master didn't respond and directly bumped into me. Cui Jiang was annoyed and didn't want to talk about this matter anymore. He changed the topic and said, You went to visit your parents' home this time. How are your parents' health? Father and mother are in good health. The woman said, then looked at him and asked, Master, did you encounter something difficult? Why don't you tell me? Cui Jiang sighed and said, Let's go back to the room and talk. Cui Jiang knew that he wasn't a smart person, but it didn't matter because he had a smart wife. He became a jinshi at a young age. Because he didn't have any background in the court, he only became a county magistrate in a remote county. After becoming a county magistrate, he realized that studying and being an official were 2 completely different things. He didn't make any achievements in the 2 years he was in office. According to the evaluation requirements of the court, if he did nothing for another 3 years, he wouldn't even have the qualifications to be a county magistrate. He had already lost all hope and no longer dreamed of one day being able to enter the court. The drive of a young man was worn down by reality. Disheartened, he married and had children. Then his life seemed to be riding on a speeding carriage. Within 5 years he was promoted several times, from a county magistrate to a provincial governor of Jianghu. It took another 5 years for him to be transferred to the capital and become the assistant minister of the Ministry of Revenue. From the assistant minister of the Ministry of Revenue to the minister of Revenue, it took him another 10 years. Until now, he had realized the long-cherished wish of his youth and entered the court. Although it couldn't be said that he could cover the sky with one hand, the Minister of Revenue could be considered one of the important pillars of the court. Of course, this wasn't because he had an epiphany and comprehended the way of governing and outstanding political achievements. It was because his wife was by his side, giving him advice, judging the situation and avoiding risks. This allowed him to be like a fish in water in the officialdom and sit in the high position he had today. Along the way there were countless people who had better political achievements and were more talented than him, but he, Cui Jiang, was the Minister of Revenue. He felt that the greatest achievement in his life wasn't success at a young age, nor was it passing the imperial examination, nor was it even managing the Ministry of Revenue, but marrying such a wife. In the room, after listening to Cui Jiang's words, the woman let out a long sigh. I only went back to my parents' home for half a month. How could you make things like this? Hearing this, Cui Jiang's heart trembled and he hurriedly asked, Madam, are you saying that there's something wrong with those stones? The woman didn't answer him directly. She shook her head and said, Master, do you remember what I did when the crown prince sent someone to invite you? I remember. Cui Jiang shivered and said, It was in the middle of winter. You snatched my blanket in the middle of the night and caused me to catch a cold. I was bedridden at home for half a month. But you still went to the Crown Prince's banquet despite your illness? What's the point of saying this now? Cui Jiang was a little anxious and said, quickly tell me what's wrong with those stones. There's nothing wrong with the stones. The woman shook her head and said, the third prince's people come to the Cui residence every day. Yesterday they came with gifts but returned empty-handed. What would the first prince think? Cui Jiang was stunned and said, but they used the stones to test me. I've already told the first prince everything. The woman continued to shake her head and said, unless you block them outside the Cui residence. As long as the two chests enter the Cui residence, there's no point in leaving. Moreover, when I came back I heard some rumors. What rumors? The third prince bought a few residences in the capital, but he didn't name them. Does the third prince buying residences have anything to do with this matter? The woman looked at him and said, Master, why don't you guess which residence was given to you? Cui Jiang slumped weakly on the chair. His face was pale and he cursed, conspiracy, this is a conspiracy. They're too shameless and cunning. This isn't a conspiracy. This is an open conspiracy. An open conspiracy. The woman looked outside and said, they've taken advantage of the Crown Prince's suspicious nature. These things may seem unrelated but they're actually interconnected. Whether you respond or not, you'll fall into their trap. An open conspiracy was more powerless than a conspiracy carried out in the dark. Cui Jiang jumped up from the chair and said loudly, I'll go and explain to the first prince. I'll go now. Master. The woman's voice suddenly rose. Cui Jiang's body trembled and he turned to look at her. It's too late. The woman held his hand and said, it's too late. Master, you know the Crown Prince's character very well. He won't make things difficult for you on the surface, but he'll be even more suspicious. There's an expert on the third prince's side. She looked at Cui Jiang and said slowly, for the Cui family, Master, you have to make plans early. Qian family. Get lost, all of you. Qian Duo climbed up the tree and hugged the trunk tightly. His face was filled with fear as he shouted at the group of Taoist priests and monks below. At this moment he was already above the roof. It was hard to imagine that a fat man could climb so high. Under the tree, a monk in red held a wooden fish and chanted the name of Buddha. With a sorrowful expression he said, Amitabha, humans and ghosts are different. If you're willing to let young Master Qian go, I'll chant sutras for you with all the monks in the temple for 3 days and help you reach paradise. A Taoist priest in green held a horsetail whisk and said coldly, evil creature, leave quickly. If you dare to harm the human world again, don't blame me for enforcing justice on behalf of heaven and destroying your soul. Under the eaves, a woman looked at the god of fortune Qian. She hesitated for a moment and said, Master, don't you think it's too much to punish Duo like this? The god of fortune Qian snorted and said, I'm trying to wake him up. Now that he's grown up, he even dares to deceive his father. With his little cultivation, if he's not careful, he'll be eaten up by others. Chapter 11:28. Qian Duo came down from the tree and sat on the ground, panting. The monks and Taoist priests had left. Just now, they had been arguing about who had driven away the ghost on their bodies. In the end, they fought and were carried to the clinic. Only then did he have a chance to catch his breath. Money God came over, squatted down beside him and said, Do you feel better? Much better. Qian Duo leaned against the tree and pretended to be very weak, creating the illusion that the ghost had disappeared from his body. He didn't need to pretend. He was already very weak. He was almost exhausted after climbing such a high tree. Money God looked at him and asked, Do you know why I did that? Qian Duo nodded and quickly shook his head. Money God patted his leg and said, Sometimes people can't be too smart. Those who are too strong are easy to break, and those who are good at softness are not defeated. I don't ask you to be too smart. I just want you to live a stable life. When you die, don't ruin the family business of the Qian family. Qian Kaishan looked at him and asked, Dad asked you to go to Liuzhou to learn how to do business from Miss Lin. Look at you. What kind of messy things have you learned? Qian Duo nodded and said, Dad, I understand. I won't talk nonsense anymore. You're enlightened. I'm very happy that you can help me with ideas. Money God nodded with relief and said, I just found out that the Minister of the Ministry of Revenue, Cui Jiang, has a large amount of silver flowing to unknown places. If it is brought up in the morning meeting tomorrow, it will be enough to make him lose his official hat, cut off one of the Crown Prince's arms, and eliminate this great enemy for the third prince. What do you think of this? Chen Duoduo shook his head and said, "Dad, I can't see anything." Money God waved his hand and said, "It's okay. Say what you want. There are no outsiders here." Chen Duoduo thought about it and looked around again. Then he looked at the God of Fortune and said seriously, "Father, I don't think this is a good idea. The Minister of Revenue is such a high position. If he is demoted, who knows who will replace him? What if it is the great prince's people who will be replaced? Then all our previous efforts will be in vain." Money God of Fortune nodded and asked, "So what do you think we should do?" A mysterious smile appeared on Chen Duoduo's face as he said, "If we can reduce Cui Jiang's guilt and let him still sit in that position, but he can be used by us, that would naturally be the best result." Money God of Fortune pondered for a moment and nodded, "This is a good plan." He looked at Chen Duoduo again and said, "Duoduo, I heard that the Taoist priest of Qingyang Taoist Temple has inherited the teachings of Lao Jun, and the abbot of Xingshan Temple is the reincarnation of Luohan. I feel that the evil spirits in your body have not been completely removed, so I plan to invite them to take a look at you tomorrow." Chen Duoduo's face instantly turned pale. He looked at him and said with a trembling voice, "Dad, didn't you just say?" The money god sighed, patted him on the shoulder and said, "Duoduo, you have to remember in this world don't trust anyone except yourself. In the court of the Qi kingdom, since His Majesty fell ill, the first prince took over the government, and the third prince supervised the country. The situation in the court began to change and become unpredictable. The two parties tried their best all the time to reduce the power of the other party in the court and strengthen their own side. Today there was another imperial censor who reported that the accounts of the Ministry of Revenue were in disorder, and several funds were unclear. In the court, several imperial censors jointly impeached the minister of the Ministry of Revenue, Cui Jiang, in front of all the officials. Fortunately, the impeachment was not for corruption or taking bribes, but for neglect of duty at most, and the punishment was only a year's salary forfeiture. In fact, for the officials of the court above the third level, as long as they were not involved in a big case, they would usually be punished with salary forfeiture or reprimand. To the surprise of the officials, the crown prince showed a business-like attitude towards this matter from beginning to end, which was completely different from the previous situation where he tried his best to defend others. The minister of the Ministry of Revenue had a high status and was in charge of the money and grain of the country. He was one of the first prince's most important henchmen, and if something happened to him, the crown prince would lose an arm. His disregard for Cui Jiang today was completely illogical. This made everyone recall the rumors in the capital in recent days. It was said that some of the officials at the first prince's side, including the Minister of Revenue Cui Jiang, had been secretly bribed by the third prince. Not only were they close to the third prince's people, there were even people who saw the third prince's people carrying 2 large chests into the Cui residence, and when they came out there were no more chests. Of course, these were all rumors and the truth could not be verified. They could also be framing or sowing discord. The most important thing was what the first prince was thinking. Judging from the first prince's performance in the morning court, this matter seemed a little more believable. Prince Heng's residence. Zhaoi Zhaoi. Zhao Zheng smashed everything in the hall that could be smashed into pieces. The servants and maids around him all knelt on the ground, trembling. An old man waited for him to finish venting before stepping forward and raising his head to say, "Your Highness, today in the court, it was very unwise." "Unwise?" Zhao Zheng looked at him and gritted his teeth. "Tell me, how unwise was it?" The old man slowly said, "Your Highness disregarded official Cui. Wouldn't it disappoint him?" "Disappoint him? I haven't disappointed him yet." Zhao Zheng's face showed anger again. "What Zhaoi can give him, can't I? Why would he betray I?" "Your Highness, you must not think that way." The old man hurriedly said, "If your Highness thinks that way, wouldn't it be as the third prince wants?" Today in the court, the one who impeached official Cui was clearly the third prince's man. "What do you know?" Zhao Jing waved his hand. "What Cui Jiang did is enough for him to lose his position as the Minister of Revenue. But what did Zhao Yi say? What did the censors say? Forfeit his salary for a year. Only forfeit his salary for a year." Zhao Jing panted. "What's the big deal about forfeiting his salary for a year? The gold and silver that Zhao Yi gave him is worth 100 years of his salary." His expression turned cold. "Cui Jiang, I treated you with sincerity. Since you treat I this way, don't blame I for being impolite." Cui manner. Cui Jiang's heart was filled with complicated feelings. He really didn't know what to feel. He knew that the censors had let him off in the court today. Otherwise, what he had done for the first prince was enough to make him lose his position as the Minister of Revenue. This was something to be happy about. However, the first prince's inaction towards him made him feel very uncertain. Beside him, the woman sighed. Before today, the first prince only had suspicions about Master. After today, I'm afraid he has no doubts. Cui Jiang turned around to look at his wife. He said anxiously, "Then what should we do? They have already forced me into a dead end." Cui Jiang was in despair and felt wronged. He clearly hadn't done anything. The third prince had only bought a manor and sent a few censors to cause trouble at his house. Yet, he had already lost the first prince's trust. Damn it, he was even more wrong than Dou-yi. It's not that Master doesn't have a dead end. The woman shook her head and said, "From the very beginning, someone pointed out a bright path for you, Qian Manor." Yang Yanzhou had just walked in. He looked at the God of Fortune with a smile and said, "Brother God of Fortune, Cui Jiang has surrendered to His Highness." Before he finished speaking, he looked at a corner of the room with a slightly surprised expression. Beside the table, Chen Duo looked at the bowl of black talisman water in front of him and shook his head. "I don't want to drink it. I don't want to drink it, Liuzhou." Li Yi had just coaxed Li Mu to sleep. He gently placed her on the bed and covered her with a blanket. He then walked out of the room. Just now, he suddenly realized something. The reason why the Qi kingdom had its current stability was because of the balance of power between the crown prince and the third prince. The Taoist nun was standing behind the first prince. She was glaring at the first prince. He didn't know what her motive was, but the balance at the moment should be what they wanted to see. If this balance was broken, what would happen? He didn't know. Chapter 11:29. There were still a few months before Ruoqing's due date, so Li didn't have the energy to think about other things for the time being. What he taught Chen Duo was just something he did casually. It was hard to say whether he could understand it or not, and the probability of using it on the first prince was even smaller. Of course, a small probability event was not impossible. If Chen Duo had really been enlightened or had been possessed by a ghost, he would have resorted to both overt and overt schemes, forcefully breaking the balance of power between the first prince and the third prince. As a result, some unknown possibilities would develop, but he could not be blamed. After all, he had only done some minor work. He had only taught Chen Duo how to do business and had given a few inappropriate examples. Wanru had been in Liuzhou for almost half a year, and the business in Liuzhou had been on the right track for a few months. It was a little inappropriate to tell the stewards of other states that she was trying to stabilize the business. Now that the Lantern Festival was over, they were about to set off. The most important business of the Lin family was still in the capital, and they probably had to stop at a few states on the way. He and Rui would naturally wait until Ruoqing gave birth before they set off. They might not necessarily go to the capital of the Qi kingdom, but they would pass by nearby, and there would definitely be opportunities to meet. "Don't forget what you said." When Li Yi sent her to the carriage, she had already lifted the curtain, paused and turned back to say so. Li Yi looked at her and asked, "Which one do you mean? Last year you said in 2 years and this year it is 1 year." Lin Wanru put down the curtain, and her figure disappeared from his sight. The carriage went far away and Li Yi stood still for a long time. "She has gone far away and you are still looking." A clear voice came from behind. Li Yi turned around and looked at Mississippi Lu. Mississippi Lu held Li Mu in her arms, and Li Mu held Autumn Water in his arms. There was one thing that Li Yi always felt strange. They were both his children, but Li Duan treated Rui like a mouse seeing a cat. However, Li Duan was very close to her since he was a child. It seemed that Li Duan inherited more from him. Li Mu put down Qiushui and reached out to him. He said in a childish voice, "Daddy, hug?" Li Yi walked over and opened his arms. Li Mu came down from Rui's arms, turned around and immediately trotted out. "Mother, little Andy, you're back. Xiaomu wants to eat candy." Li Mu ran away at the last minute. Li Yi was still holding his arms open as if he was going to hug Mississippi Lu. The atmosphere was slightly awkward. Mississippi Lu crossed her arms and looked at him. Li Yi also crossed his arms and pretended to ask casually, "How's the situation on the Wu Kingdom's side?" "We fought a few big battles." Mississippi Lu said casually, "We won but not lost. We've already occupied nearly 30 states. The imperial court has been tightening their military strength, and now they're in a stalemate again." This situation was actually within Li Yi's expectations. In terms of weapons, the imperial court of the Wu kingdom was not as advanced as Jianghu and the others. In terms of people's hearts, in the Wu kingdom, Her Royal Highness the eldest princess had long become the rightful ruler of the royal family. The current Emperor Wu was just a thief who stole the country. After unifying their thinking and operating the brothels, this was almost the consensus of the people of the Wu kingdom. They couldn't win the battle. Only by shrinking the battle circle could they maintain the appearance of not being destroyed. If they shrank, there would be no more space to shrink. Of course, this needed time. When the time came, Yang Liuqing would become the empress. What would he be, the imperial uncle? That didn't sound good. It was better to think about it when the time came. He had just received a letter. Elder Tian's body had more or less recovered, and he expressed his curiosity about the Taoist nun. He said that after the new year he would come over and get to know Su's old acquaintance. Li reckoned that they had traveled all the way from the Wu kingdom to the Wu kingdom, enjoying the undisturbed world of the two of them. By the time they arrived, it would be around the time that Ruoqing was about to give birth. An old acquaintance, an old lover, and Su. 3 people, 3 grandmasters. The scene would definitely be explosive. The capital. King Feng's manor. Zhao Xiuwen smiled and said, "Your Highness, in recent days, 5 people from the eldest prince's side have come to surrender to us." 5 people might not seem like a lot, but these 5 people were the cornerstones of the eldest prince's side. One of them was even the Minister of Revenue. Any higher and they would be the Prime Minister. This was no longer as simple as chopping off one of the eldest prince's arms. They had chopped off his limbs. Most importantly, they had made such great progress and they had not suffered any losses. In the past, this was almost impossible. He knows the eldest prince so well, and his way of doing things is different from the god of wealth. Zhao Xiuwen shook his head and said, "Could it be that this young master of the Chen family has suddenly been enlightened? Or is it, as the god of wealth said, that he has been possessed by a demon?" Zhao Yi smiled and said nothing. Zhao Xiuwen looked at him and thought for a while. Suddenly he asked, "Your Highness, do you know something? I have never believed in supernatural things. The god of wealth has 9 orifices in his heart. He is a smart person among smart people. Naturally, he would not believe in such things." He smiled and said, "As for the theory of sudden enlightenment, it might be possible, but I'm afraid it is unlikely to happen to the young master of the Chen family." "Your Highness, you mean?" Zhao Yi said, "The young master of the god of wealth went to Liuzhou a few days ago." "What about Liuzhou?" Zhao Yi said, "He's in Liuzhou." Zhao Xiuwen thought for a while, looked at him and said, "Him? Your Highness, why don't you just say it?" Zhao Yi smiled and said, "In the faraway Liuzhou, he can control the situation in the capital. Who else can do this besides him?" "Your Highness, you mean that someone has arranged all this in advance before Chen Duoduo returned to the capital?" Zhao Xiuwen's face showed disbelief and said, "How is this possible? The situation in the capital is so complicated. One wrong step can lead to a different result. Who can do this? Come with me to the Chen family and you will know who it is." Zhao Yi looked out of the window and said, "Since he has done this, it is not just this step. It is also time to go to the Chen family." In the Chen family, the god of wealth came out of the door and hurriedly said, "Your Highness, why didn't you send someone to inform me in advance that you are coming? I could have arranged it." Zhao Yi waved his hand and said, "There is no need to be so polite between us." After walking into the hall, they sat down according to the host and guest. Zhao Xiuwen looked at the god of wealth and said, "Where is young Master Chen now?" The god of wealth looked at him and said, "He is repenting in the Chen family's ancestral hall. Why is Xiuwen looking for him?" Zhao Xiuwen shook his head and said, "It is not me who is looking for young Master Chen. It is his highness who is looking for him." The god of wealth looked at the third prince. After getting confirmation from his eyes, he said to the servants around him, "Go and bring the young master here." Not long after, a listless Chen Duoduo walked in. He looked up, cupped his hands and bowed. "Greetings, Your Highness King Feng and Lord Zhao." Zhao Yi looked at him and said, "I have come here this time to ask you something." The god of wealth looked at him and said, "You must answer His Highness's questions truthfully." Chen Duoduo nodded. Zhao Yi looked at him and asked, "A few days ago, who taught you the tactic of sowing discord?" Chen Duoduo looked up at him and said blankly, "What tactic of sowing discord?" Zhao Xiuwen reminded him, "The tactic you used to deal with the Minister of Revenue." "I don't know about the tactic of sowing discord, and I don't know the Minister of Revenue." Chen Duoduo waved his hand and said, "It was all done by the dirty thing on me. I don't know anything." The god of wealth coughed dryly and looked at him. His Highness is one of us. You don't have to hide it. What are you hiding? I don't even know what you are talking about. A trace of doubt appeared on Chen Duoduo's face at first, but it suddenly turned into fear. He stood up abruptly and ran around the hall shouting, "Don't come over, don't bother me anymore. I have black dog blood, I have black donkey hooves, evil spirit retreat, evil spirit retreat." Chapter 1130. Evil Spirit Retreat. Evil Spirit Retreat? Chen Duoduo was talking nonsense in the hall, waving his hands and feet as if he had gone crazy. The muscles on Chen Fortune God's face twitched and he said angrily, "Don't be rude in front of His Highness. Amit Ba, boundless God, Taishang Laojun is as urgent as the law, hum. Chen Duoduo spoke eloquently and returned to his seat looking a little tired. After a fierce battle with the evil spirit and winning, he was indeed tired. The third prince looked at him but he didn't ask any more questions. Yang Yanzhou scanned the surroundings and continued, "Even though we have managed to win over many officials and greatly weaken the first prince's power, the crown prince is still the crown prince. This little bit of improvement is still not enough. We still need to do more." Chen Fortune God sipped his tea and said, "As far as I know, there is still a strong force lurking around the crown prince. They haven't made any moves yet, so we have to be on guard." Zhao Yi put down his teacup and said slowly, "The holy religion." All the people present were people who stirred up trouble in the Qi kingdom, so they naturally knew what the holy religion was. It was a huge force hidden among the people of the Qi kingdom, so it was frightening. They were led by the so-called Empress, and distributed in all the provinces and mansions of the Qi kingdom. They even infiltrated the government offices and the imperial court. They were a force that the officials of the imperial court and even the emperor were extremely wary of. The imperial court and His Majesty wanted to get rid of them as soon as possible, but this force was too strong and mysterious. Usually they just lay dormant and didn't cause much turmoil. They had tried to eliminate them several times but they all failed. Now this force was colluding with the first prince, so they had to be even more careful. "Why not report this to His Majesty?" Someone said aloud. "His Majesty can't tolerate the first prince colluding with the holy religion. This is enough to make him lose the title of crown prince." "We can't." Yang Yanzhou shook his head and said, "In the eyes of the officials and His Majesty, the censors in the court are already our people. Not to mention whether His Majesty will believe us or think that we are framing them, we have too little evidence. If we act rashly, it will do us more harm than good." Someone sighed and said, "Leaving this holy religion alive is a scourge. If the holy religion is not eliminated, we will not be able to sleep at night." Getting rid of the holy religion was easier said than done. If the holy religion could be so easily eradicated, the imperial court would have banned them from appearing in the Qi kingdom a long time ago. He couldn't get rid of it, but he couldn't indulge it either. Things fell into a stalemate again. Money God of Fortune looked back at Chen Duoduo and asked, "Duoduo, what do you think about this?" Chen Duoduo was holding a teacup and sipping tea. He looked at the Money God of Fortune and said, "I don't have any thoughts." "That is your tea cold?" "If it's cold, I'll add some more for you." Money God of Fortune looked at him and said, "I won't ask Taoist priests and monks to treat you in the future. You should talk nicely. What thoughts can I have?" Chen Duoduo put down the teacup and said, "If you want to get rid of the holy religion, just send troops to fight it." "What can I do?" Someone frowned and said, "The holy religion usually lurks deeply and doesn't rebel. How can we fight it and where? It's a waste of money, manpower, and material resources. If there is no result, won't the imperial court and His Majesty blame us?" Chen Duoduo adjusted to a comfortable posture and said lazily, "Then I have no other way. If the holy religion doesn't rebel, can you force them to rebel?" The official was so angry that his face turned red. "You. Wait." Money God of Fortune waved his hand. After thinking for a moment, he looked at Zhao Yi and said, "Your Highness, this is also a way." However, Yang Yanzhou shook his head and said, "Although this method is good, it is also flawed. The matter of the holy religion is very important. Many people have been fooled by them. Only the great prince and the third prince can appease the people. The great prince is now in charge of the country and has great power. If he orders the third prince to eliminate the rebels, won't we return with nothing?" Zhao Xiaowen nodded and said, "In this way we will dig our own grave. This plan can't work." The others present were confused and had no idea what these people were talking about. They could only silently bow their heads and drink tea to cover up the embarrassment on their faces. Money God of Fortune looked at Chen Duoduo again. Before he could speak, Chen Duoduo slowly stood up and said, "Dad, I'm sick, very sick. I won't get better in 10 days or half a month. I don't know anything and I don't have any thoughts. You guys talk. I'll go back to sleep." After saying that, he walked out leisurely. Money God of Fortune was startled, then waved his hand and said, "Go." He looked at the third prince and asked, "Your Highness, what do you think of this plan?" Zhao Yi nodded slightly. Zhao Xuan laughed and said, "Very good." Yang Yinzhou stood up and said with a smile, "A stroke of genius, a stroke of genius." The rest of the people were speechless. What did they just say? What were they talking about now? Why couldn't they understand a word? The capital was already chaotic enough because of the battle for the throne between the great prince and the third prince. An urgent report that entered the capital today threw a huge stone into the already turbulent lake, setting off huge waves. The holy religion in Huizhou had rebelled. One day ago, dozens of holy religion rebels broke into the county government and robbed all the money and food. Although there were no casualties in the county government, Huizhou was part of the Jianghu region. It was the first time in decades that someone dared to rebel in the Jianghu region. Although this was a small matter, the impact was too serious. The court was in chaos because of this. Even the emperor, who had been ill for a long time, was alarmed by this matter. He personally came to the court and ordered the great prince to personally supervise this matter and not make any mistakes. The Saint Church was different from the other rebels. They were a strict organization and had a lot of influence among the people. If the imperial court were to send troops to wipe them out, there must be a prince with a suitable status to hold the fort. In the current capital, only the great prince and the third prince met this requirement. But the third prince had fallen ill 5 days ago and was bedridden. This burden could only fall on the great prince's shoulders. Prince Heng's mansion. Zhao Zheng was shouting at the young man surnamed Fang. Tell me, what are your people doing? Attacking the government office? Are you rebelling? Are you rebelling?" Zhao Zheng's face was red and he said angrily, "Do you know how much trouble this matter has brought to I? This is impossible." Fang Yu's face was gloomy. He said, "Without Her Majesty's order, the followers of the holy religion would not make decisions on their own. This must be a trap." "A trap?" Zhao Zheng looked at him and became even more angry. "Besides you, who else has such great power? If it's not you, is it Zhao Yi? The Huiyuan County Magistrate is one of us." Fang Yu looked up at him and said expressionlessly, "We want to attack the Huiyuan County Magistrate. There is no need to do this." Zhao Zheng's face was gloomy. He looked at him and said in surprise, "You mean, Zhao Yi framed you for this in order to wipe out the holy religion?" Fang Yu looked at him and said lightly, "Don't you already know why he did this, Your Highness?" Zhao Zheng sat back down, his face even more gloomy. The holy religion was his powerful backing. These days he had lost too much in the battle with Zhao Yi. He still hoped that the holy religion could help him turn the tables, so how could he eliminate them? But Imperial Father had given him a death order, so he couldn't ignore it. If he didn't achieve anything, what would Imperial Father and the court officials think of him? Zhao Yi would probably laugh like crazy in his heart. He thought for a moment and suddenly sneered. "Zhao Yi, you should take care of what you did. I sent you to Huizhou to wipe out the bandits. Do you dare to defy the decree?" Behind him, an old man stepped forward and reminded him in a low voice, "Your Highness, have you forgotten that King Feng fell ill 5 days ago and can't get out of bed?" The imperial physician said that he needs to rest for at least a month. "What did you say?" A moment later, the hall was filled with shouts and curses, as well as the sound of tables and chairs colliding. Chapter 1131. At Prince Heng's residence, Zhao Zheng had vented his anger for a while before he gradually calmed down. He had to remain calm. This was a crucial moment and not the time to be impulsive. He had already lost too much to Zhao Yi. Once he left the capital, Zhao Yi would be in charge and he would have nothing to do with the court. They had poached the Minister of Revenue and other officials from him in a short period of time. It was equivalent to cutting off his limbs and controlling most of the court. Now, they wanted to use this method to make him leave the capital. How could he fall for such a sinister trick? How could he dare to fall for it? If he stepped out of this place, he would not be able to come back. Zhao Zheng lifted a chair and sat on it. He said in a deep voice, "I cannot leave." Fang Yu stood in the hall and looked at Zhao Zheng. He thought for a moment and said, Prince Heng is right. You cannot leave the capital. Zhao Jing said slowly, but I have to answer to father and the court officials. Leave this matter to us. Fang Yu thought for a moment and a trace of determination appeared on his face. It did not take long for the chaos caused by the holy religion to be quelled. The crown prince was still preparing for his journey in the capital. He had only issued an order for the garrison in Huizhou to eliminate the bandits of the holy religion. Unexpectedly, the holy religion was much easier to deal with than they had imagined. It did not take much effort for the garrison in Huizhou to destroy the branch of the holy religion in Huizhou. They captured more than 100 bandits of the holy religion and escorted them all the way to the capital. The news of victory arrived in less than 2 days. The chaos in Huizhou had been resolved without the crown prince's presence. This was the greatest victory that the court had achieved in the battle against the holy religion. His Majesty was very pleased. He rewarded the crown prince and delegated more power to him. For a time, the crown prince and the third prince reached a delicate balance in the court. King Feng's residence. Zhao Xiuwen let out a long sigh and said, I didn't expect the holy religion to be so decisive. They didn't hesitate to sacrifice a branch of the holy religion to help the crown prince stabilize the situation. All our previous efforts have been in vain. At the very least, the strength of the holy religion has been weakened. I don't believe that they would destroy their own foundation for the sake of the crown prince. Yes, I want to see how many arms they can break. Other than Huizhou, there are still more than a dozen prefectures in the capital region. They like to kill each other, so let them take their time. Fortune God Chen was deep in thought. He did not say anything from the beginning until the end. After an hour, he left King Feng's mansion. In the Chen mansion, Chen Duoduo was sitting in the room and counting the banknotes in boredom. The god of fortune Chen pushed the door open and entered. Chen Duoduo looked up and put away the banknotes. Money god of fortune walked to his side and asked, What else did he say to you? Chen Duoduo was stunned and asked, Who? The person you met in Liuzhou. Who? Money god of fortune Chen looked at him and said, A few days ago my father met a few senior monks. I heard that the Dharma is profound. Be careful of the Taoist nuns. Money god of fortune Chen looked at him and asked, What Taoist nuns? The empress of the holy religion. Don't underestimate the holy religion. They have a big plan. They don't sincerely support the crown prince. The crown prince is at most a puppet. Don't push them to the extreme or something terrible will happen. Money god of fortune Chen thought about it and said, Pack your things now and go back to Fengzhou with your mother. Money god of fortune Chen kicked his butt. What up? Hurry up. Zhao Jing was very happy. In the battle with Zhao Yi, he had the upper hand several times, which was rare. The holy religion kept rebelling, and he kept sending people to suppress the rebellion. He won 3 battles, and his father was very satisfied with what he had done these days. The court also praised him more than before. He looked at Fang Yu and said with a smile, Envoy Fang, how about you sacrifice a few more prefectures? I promise that as long as I can be promoted, I can compensate you for what you have lost now. Fang Yu smiled and said, For the great cause of your highness, what's the harm of sacrificing a few more prefectures? Zhao Zheng was overjoyed. Then it's a deal. This time I will go in person. Fang Yu agreed with a smile on his face. It was not until he walked out of Prince Heng's mansion that his face became completely gloomy. He walked through several streets and came to a yard. After knocking on the door and entering, he bowed and said, Your Highness, these days the holy religion's strength in the capital region has been greatly damaged. Zhao Zheng's request is a bit too much. A voice came from the darkness. It's not time for the emperor of the Qi kingdom to die yet. Fang Yu thought for a moment and said in a low voice, But your highness, it wasn't easy for us to infiltrate the officials. After being framed and instigated by the third prince, Zhao Jing no longer trusts them. If the holy religion's strength continues to weaken, even if Zhao Jing becomes the emperor, it will do us more harm than good. Fang Yu's face was gloomy. He said, We must let him know that without the holy religion, he is nothing. The other side was silent for a long time before a voice came again. Then let the third prince benefit first. Fang Yu looked up. Your Highness, what do you mean? That person should also die. The Qi kingdom was different from other countries. Just because the crown prince was the crown prince didn't mean that he would really sit on the throne. Everything depended on the emperor's final edict. His Majesty's attitude toward the crown prince was vague. His attitude toward the third prince was also vague. This caused the court to be divided into three factions: the Crown Prince's faction, the Third Prince's faction, and the Soy Sauce faction. During this time, the Crown Prince, who had been gloomy for a long time, began to shine. His performance in eliminating the rebels of the holy religion was remarkable. He even showed signs of returning to the court. This time, in order to boost morale and dampen the arrogance of the holy religion, the Crown Prince had personally gone to the capital region to eliminate the rebels of the holy religion. When he returned, his reputation in the capital would definitely rise to a higher level. Of course, the premise was that there were no unexpected situations. For example, the Crown Prince died while eliminating the rebels. Or, after the Crown Prince left the capital, His Majesty suddenly died, and the Third Prince smoothly took over the imperial army and entered the palace. Or the Third Prince directly rebelled and forced the Emperor to abdicate the throne. Of course, the Crown Prince had many guards around him. His Majesty's health was not at its end yet. It was even more impossible for the Third Prince to take the opportunity to rebel. These were all unlikely events. Victory State. A few carriages slowly entered the city gate. Lin Yong opened the curtain and said to Lin Wanru, "Miss, I heard that the holy religion is wreaking havoc here. Why don't we return to the capital first?" Lin Wanru thought for a moment and said, "Let's wait and see first. It's the last state anyway, all right." Lin Yong replied and said, "Then I'll find a place to rest first." Lu State. Ruoqing had given birth 2 days ago. Both mother and child were safe. Other than his younger sister, Li Duan had another younger brother. Li Yi had also received a letter from Su a few days ago. He and Elder Tian were already on their way and would arrive in a few days. At this time it was the 28th year of Jingyuan, the 5th month of the Qi Kingdom. The first prince had eliminated the rebels of the holy religion in the capital region, and his reputation was growing day by day. The third prince temporarily took over the reins and established his authority in the imperial court. In the depths of the palace, the emperor of the Qi Kingdom had just taken his medicine and was sleeping soundly in his chambers. An hour later, a bell suddenly rang in the middle of the night. On the 13th day of the 5th month, the 28th year of the Qi Kingdom, the emperor passed away in Wanhua Hall. Overnight, the entire capital was shocked. Chapter 1132. His Majesty's stubborn illness had not been cured, and the two princes fought fiercely for the throne. In order to fight for the supreme position, the eldest prince and the third prince should have used all kinds of means and resorted to all kinds of means. The fight for the throne had always been like this, and this was what the eldest prince and the third prince had done. However, no one expected that the former emperor would pass away in the palace in the evening after announcing a series of decrees in high spirits during the morning court session yesterday. There was no precaution. There was no edict of succession. The crown prince was not in the capital. Although the position of the crown prince of the Qi Kingdom was not as stable as that of the neighboring countries, the crown prince was the nominal heir to the throne. When the former emperor suddenly passed away and there was no succession, it was reasonable for the crown prince to inherit the throne. This was the ancestral system. However, the crown prince was not in the capital at such a critical moment. The third prince was in the capital. The third prince, who had already grown his wings in the court, would definitely die if the crown prince succeeded the throne. There was no doubt about it. It was the same the other way around. It was already late at night and most of the people in the capital had fallen asleep. However, when the bell that represented the death of the emperor rang in the palace, everyone from the dignitaries to the common people was awakened from their sleep. Fortune god Chen hurriedly put on his clothes. He did not even have time to button them up before he ran to the door and shouted, "Quick, prepare the carriage. We're going to King Feng's mansion." At this time, the sedan chair of Minister of Revenue Cui Jiang had already stopped in front of King Feng's mansion. When fortune god Chen arrived at the gate of King Feng's mansion, there were already more than 10 sedan chairs parked on both sides. "Your Highness, you should restrain your grief and focus on the overall situation. This is a great opportunity for us. Your Highness, please give the order." When fortune god Chen walked into King Feng's mansion, the third prince was already surrounded by people. They all looked excited and kept urging him. Soon after, countless figures hurried out of King Feng's mansion and disappeared in different directions. The emperor had passed away, and the crown prince had left the capital. Only the third prince could take charge of the situation. On the night of the former emperor's death, the third prince went to the palace to make arrangements. On the second day, all the officials gathered in front of the palace gate. The Minister of State took out a posthumous edict and read it in front of everyone. It was an edict of succession. The imperial edict stated that the crown prince, Zhao Zheng, did not cultivate virtue and conduct, and that he was disloyal and disloyal. For the sake of the people of the Qi kingdom and the people of the world, the late emperor had deposed the crown prince, Zhao Zheng, and passed the throne to the third prince, Zhao Yi. Most people were skeptical about the authenticity of the edict. Before the crown prince left the capital, the emperor had greatly praised him. After a few days, how could such a posthumous edict appear? But that was then and this was now. The capital was firmly under the third prince's control, and many of the ministers of the court respected him as their master. Even those officials loyal to the crown prince did not dare to step forward. The crown prince had left the capital at this crucial moment, and the third prince had taken advantage of this opening to enter. These people were like clay bodhisattvas crossing the river, powerless to protect themselves. The former emperor had just passed away, and the third prince could not succeed the throne immediately. But with the edict of succession, he had obtained the military seal, which was enough to command the 50,000 imperial guards in the capital. Moreover, there were too many ministers loyal to him in the court. In a short night, he had gained control of the entire capital. The capital, which had been treacherous for several years, seemed to have ended all the chaos in the blink of an eye, and the dust had settled. In Shung province, several hundred li away from the capital, the crown prince, who had just wiped out the rebels of the holy religion, was riding on his horse in high spirits. When he received an urgent report from the front, his face instantly turned pale, his body swayed and he fell off his horse. The guards on his left and right hurriedly helped him up and shouted, "Imperial physician, summon the imperial physician." Fang Yu stepped forward and pinched Zhao Zheng's philtrum. Not long after, he coughed heavily and woke up. Zhao Zheng's face was ashen and he kept muttering, "It's over, it's over, it's all over." He had never imagined that his father would suddenly pass away when he was leaving the capital. Zhao Yi had already gained control of the situation in the capital. Everything he had done, everything he had fantasized about, and the throne that he had coveted for a long time, had all become bubbles. Fang Yu shook him heavily and said, "Your Highness, you can't give up." Zhao Zheng looked at him and smiled bitterly. "Zhao Yi must have controlled the imperial guards in the capital now. What can I use to fight against him? What can I use to fight against him?" Bah! Fang Yu slapped him across the face. Zhao Zheng was stunned as blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. The third prince only controls the capital, and only controls 50,000 imperial guards. Fang Yu looked at him and said angrily, "You are the crown prince and the throne should have been yours. He is just a traitor, a traitor. There are 50,000 imperial guards in the capital, but outside the capital, there are another 150,000 soldiers. How did you lose?" Zhao Zheng was stunned for a moment and then he finally understood. There were 200,000 soldiers stationed in the capital, and only 50,000 of them were in the capital. The other 150,000 were scattered in the various provinces of the capital. After his father passed away, his people rushed over. Zhao Zheng's reaction was definitely not as fast as theirs. If he could control all the soldiers in the capital, 150,000 against 50,000, and with the help of the holy religion, how could he not conquer the capital? He immediately took out a token from his waist and stuffed it into Fang Yu's hands, saying, "Envoy Fang, hurry, hurry. We must hurry before that traitor." "Rest assured, Your Highness." Fang Yu took the token and turned around to leave. After walking a dozen steps, a cold smile appeared on his face. The capital must be conquered. At that time there would be no need for Zhao Zheng to exist. The Empress's plan was much simpler than directly helping Zhao Zheng to the throne. The disaster of war had erupted abruptly, and with the death of Emperor Xian, the third prince had seized the opportunity to ascend to the throne, taking control of the 50,000 imperial army in the capital. Meanwhile, the first prince had gathered more than 100,000 soldiers outside the capital and was directing his vanguard at the capital. Although the third prince was in an important area of the capital, his retreat had been cut off. Faced with an army more than twice his size, he could only rely on the walls to barely hold out. If not for the fact that the capital was heavily stocked with provisions, he would not have been able to hold out for long. The capital region, which had always been peaceful, became a land of war in a short period of time. Although the first prince's army did not massacre the people like the foreign invaders, it was not uncommon for them to forcibly take food and fodder and forcibly conscript the people. The entire capital region was in a state of panic. In Victory Province, a purple-clothed man walked into a camp and bowed. "Reporting to Protector, several armies have fallen under our control. Zhao Zheng is no longer of much use to us. Why don't we? Fang Yu waved his hand and said, No, no, no. On the surface, we still need His Highness the Crown Prince as our cover. Otherwise we'll have no justifiable reason to attack. Even though the holy religion had been operating in the Qi Kingdom for more than 20 years and had reached its peak after Zhao Zheng had delegated power to it, without Zhao Zheng, they were just like the third prince, rebels. With Zhao Zheng they were the masters of justice. As for whether the crown prince would die of an illness after conquering the capital, fall to his death on a horse, choked to death while eating, only the heavens could predict this. Fang Yu looked outside the tent and sighed. He muttered, If there's a divine punishment, how hard can it be to conquer a city? The capital. All the city gates in the north, south, east, and west had been closed. The drawbridge by the moat had been raised, and the entire capital was on high alert. King Feng Zhaoyi had taken over the capital, but he had not moved into the imperial palace. In King Feng's residence the officials and strategists looked gloomy. No one had expected the first prince to move so quickly. In such a short time, he had gained control of most of the military forces in the capital region and surrounded the capital. Although they had more than twice the number of soldiers, they still could not conquer the capital. However, the capital was isolated and without reinforcements. If they continued to waste time like this, the city would be exhausted one day if reinforcements did not arrive. Now that he thought about it, the crown prince had left the capital, His Majesty had passed away, and the crown prince had led troops to surround the city. It was as if there was a pair of invisible hands messing around with the whole thing. When Li Yi received the news, he was also stunned for a long time before he recovered. The emperor of the Qi Kingdom had passed away. Zhao Yi had taken control of the capital, but he was surrounded. It could be said that the first prince had benefited from the disaster. He had only temporarily lost the throne. When Zhao Yi was exhausted, he would return to the throne sooner or later. Of course, this was what others had predicted. Li Yi had a rough idea of what Taoist Nun wanted. They wanted the entire Qi Kingdom. Zhao Zheng and Zhao Yi were their pawns. They might not be smart, but their influence was too great. A grandmaster had abandoned martial arts and started a cult for more than 20 years. No one knew to what extent they had infiltrated the Qi Kingdom. If that was the case, perhaps Zhao Yi had forced them into a corner, and that was why they had pushed the Qi Kingdom into chaos. Why did Zhao Yi have to force the other party to such an extent? She was committing a sin. Chapter 1133. Li Yi thought for a long time about how Zhao Yi had forced Zhao Zheng into a dead end, causing Taoist Nun to turn hostile and gather 150,000 soldiers to besiege the capital. Since she could not conquer the capital, she planned to exhaust him to death. He had to take the blame for this. After all, he was a man who valued his reputation and would never shirk his responsibilities. He was the one who taught Chen Duoduo the stratagem of sowing discord and borrowing a knife. These stratagems had been tested countless times in history. If one didn't work, he would change to another. There was bound to be a trick that worked for Zhao Zheng. And things went smoother than he had imagined. Zhao Zheng did not refuse any of these tricks and took them all. As a result, his subordinates all ran away with Zhao Yi. The holy religion did not provoke anyone, but it also suffered an unexpected disaster. Its branches in several provinces had no choice but to walk into the trap. If Li Yi were Taoist Nun, he would not have tolerated it either. But this was not his original intention. He just wanted to repay Zhao Yi for taking care of the Lin family in Wanru for the past few years. He also taught Chen Duoduo some things in the hope that it would strengthen the strength of Zhao Yi's faction. But who would have thought that besides spending money, young Master Chen's ability to draw inferences from one instance was also beyond the reach of ordinary people. Zhao Yi had benefited a lot from the way of doing business. However, even Li Yi did not expect that Taoist Nun's influence in the capital of the Qi Kingdom had already infiltrated the palace. She wanted the emperor of the Qi Kingdom to die, and the emperor of the Qi Kingdom would die at that time. They did not choose to help Zhao Zheng ascend the throne. Li Yi guessed that perhaps they also realized that if they helped him, the situation would be out of their control if Zhao Zheng fell out with them. Given the crown prince's character, it was not strange for him to burn the bridge after crossing the river. He first gave the capital to Zhao Yi, and in the blink of an eye, he used Zhao Zheng's name to gather more than 100,000 soldiers in the capital and surrounding the capital. Zhao Zheng was the crown prince and no one could change this. No matter how outstanding Zhao Yi was, he had to lower his head before him. The crown prince was not in the capital, and the third prince issued a fake imperial edict to send troops under the pretext of restoring order. Even the people of the Qi Kingdom and the court could not refute it. Li Yi had always thought that Taoist Nun's IQ and EQ were only average, although she was skilled in martial arts, but he had to admit that her play was too beautiful. They were probably already in control of the more than 100,000 soldiers outside the capital. Once the capital was truly breached, Zhao Zheng's usefulness would end there. Li Yi felt a little guilty. Zhao Yi had helped him so much, and when he finally wanted to repay him, something like this had happened. This debt of gratitude was too unfair. He was not worried about Zhao Yi. They were not in dire straits even if they were surrounded by twice the number of soldiers. Since he had already received the news, the various prefectures of the Qi Kingdom must have responded as well. Zhao Yi's reputation among the people was not for show. The provincial governor and governor of Liuzhou had already united the surrounding prefectures and were preparing to gather troops and head for the capital. He was worried about Lin Wanru. Her destination this time was the capital. When she sent the letter half a month ago, she had already arrived in the capital region. He did not know if she had reached the capital and what the situation there was now. She was accompanied by guards and several experts, enough to deal with most emergencies. But now that the Qi Kingdom was in chaos, Li Yi still felt a little worried. With this thought in mind, he suddenly moved a few feet to the side, dodging a withered palm. An old voice came from behind him. "I haven't seen you for a year and everyone in your family is a monster, a monster." Su looked at him with an extremely shocked expression and smacked his lips, looking very hurt. As a grandmaster, his self-confidence had taken a huge hit when he failed to launch a sneak attack from the back. Li Yi thought to himself, are all grandmasters the same? Do they all like to sneak attack from behind? Fortunately, he had not stopped practicing during this period of time. The tortoise breathing skill had been running day and night. Although he still could not defeat Mississippi Lu, Bai Su could still suppress her with one hand. At this time, Bai Su could almost sweep the heaven list. Although he was still not a match for Mississippi Lu, he had vaguely touched a certain realm. It was even up to luck to see who would break through first. If he was a little luckier, then Rui would probably be the first to succumb to his despotic power. After successfully getting rid of the single relationship, Su actually did not look as sloppy as before. There were no oil stains on his clothes and his hair was tied up neatly. He did not look like he used to. Where's old man Chong? How dare he steal this old man's disciple? It's time to settle the score with him. If it was not for his temperament, Li Yi would definitely think that he had recognized the wrong person. Li Yi pointed to the courtyard next to him. Su stomped his feet and flew straight over the wall. After a while, there was a dull sound coming from the other side of the wall. Su and Taoist Nun were old enemies. He fought with Changde purely because he was itching to fight. There were not many people who could go all out with him. Chang was one of them. Moreover, the two of them had some old grudges. Because of Li Duan, there was a new grudge. This time it would not end so easily. You actually broke through too. This was Su's voice. What? You're allowed to break through? You're not allowed to break through? Changde's voice was always so gloomy. Su said sarcastically, how dare you call yourself an old man? You don't even have a dick, what right do you have to call yourself an old man? People always had to pay the price for their impulsiveness. Earlier, Elder Su was still able to fight evenly with Elder Chang. But now he quickly fell into a disadvantageous position. Li Yi stood on top of the wall and saw that Elder Chang was attacking Elder Su's crotch with every move. If even one of Elder Chang's moves landed, the two of them would probably be brothers in the future. Li Yi watched from above and broke out in a cold sweat for Su. If Elder Tian had not joined the fight and forced Chang to retreat, Su would have been in danger today. If Chang had not been really angry, he and Su were actually about the same. However, he was definitely not a match for two grandmasters at the same time. Chang glanced at him disdainfully and said, you actually need a woman's help. Are you still worthy of being a grandmaster? What's wrong with my woman helping me? Su retorted fiercely. If you're so capable, find one too. Seeing the smile on Elder Tian's face, Li Yi knew that Su must have spent a lot of time studying the Mandarin duck handkerchief over the past year. When a person was shameless, he was invincible. While being shameless, he could also show off. With his current realm, he could finish his apprenticeship. Su and Elder Tian came to the Qi Kingdom to completely solve the problem of Taoist Nun. Although they did not include Rui, they had 3 grandmasters on their side. Taking down Taoist Nun would not be a problem. However, the situation had changed. Even if they had 30 grandmasters, they would not be able to fight against an army of 150,000. It would be very difficult to take down Taoist Nun. With the help of Zhao Zheng, Taoist Nun had gathered 150,000 soldiers. Coupled with the original strength of the holy religion, it would not be easy to fight against them. However, the provinces of the Qi kingdom had already gathered their troops and rushed to the capital to rescue Zhao Yi. As long as Zhao Yi could hold on for a few months, the crisis would be resolved. In addition, Taoist Nun would also try her best to stop Zhao Yi's reinforcements. As long as they could take down Zhao Yi first, these people would not be a threat. When that time came, they could support Zhao Zheng to become a fake emperor. If they continued to raise their troops, it would be considered a rebellion. They would not be able to win the hearts of the people and would not last long. Li Yi confirmed this speculation the next day. The provinces of Jianghu were under martial law. Several important cities were not allowed to enter or leave. In order to resist the reinforcements from other provinces, the people of the provinces were also conscripted to different degrees. It was also at this time that Li Yi received a letter from Lin Yong. The first prince had sealed off the important cities in the capital region. No one was allowed to enter or leave. They were trapped in Xingzhou. Chapter 1134. The Qi kingdom had 13 prefectures in the capital region. There were more than 200,000 soldiers stationed in the capital region. Other than the 50,000 imperial guards guarding the capital, the rest of the soldiers were distributed in the prefectures. The capital region was the hinterland of the Qi kingdom and was responsible for the safety of the capital. The soldiers stationed in the capital region were only under the command of the emperor. Because these prefectures were too close to the capital and too sensitive, no one dared to attack them even when the crown prince and the third prince fought fiercely for power. After the death of the emperor, Zhao Zheng, as the crown prince, took control of the 150,000 soldiers in the capital region before the third prince, Zhao Yi. He besieged the capital and completely reversed the situation. The Xingzhou was one of the 13 prefectures in the capital region. After the incident in the capital region, the Xingzhou was sealed and it was difficult to enter or leave. During this period, riots broke out more than once and there were many refugees. Lin Wanru and her group were in danger. Lin Yong tried his best to send a message. She had guards with her who were all skilled and could overcome normal dangers and difficulties. However, the situation in the war zone was ever-changing and it was not a good place to stay for long. Li Yi sat in the yard and looked at the letter for a long time. Go. A gentle voice came from behind him. He turned his head and saw Rui walking over and sitting next to him. She said, Sister Wanru is in danger now. Every day that passes she will be in more danger. Don't hesitate anymore, husband. Li Yi's lips moved and she shook her head. Don't worry about this place, husband. With me here, nothing will happen. Li Yi was silent for a long time. He put his arm around her waist and nodded. The Qi kingdom is in chaos and the Liuzhou is not a good place to stay. You should go back to the Shuzhou as soon as possible. I will pick up Wanru and go back immediately. It was not a good place to stay in the Qi kingdom. Rui escorted them from the Liuzhou route. They were accompanied by countless masters. On the way back, the branches of the holy religion had been subdued and there was almost no danger. Rui leaned on his shoulder and said, I will take care of everything here. I will leave Sister Wanru to you, husband. Hiss. Li sucked in a breath of cold air. If he wanted to talk, then talk nicely. Why did he have to twist his waist? The capital. The enemies outside the city had stopped attacking, but they did not retreat either. Instead, they set up camp outside the city. On the city wall, an imperial army general's expression darkened. Your Highness, they're trying to exhaust us to death. Zhao Yi was also clad in armor. He looked at the person beside him and asked, How long can the food stored in the city last? Minister of Revenue Cui Jiang looked outside the city and said, Your Highness, the national treasury has not been full in recent years. I have already sent people to check the major granaries in the city. If we save some, it will be enough to feed the entire city for half a year. If an ordinary city was besieged, the food in the city would be exhausted after a few months. The capital was far wealthier than ordinary cities, but the capital was densely populated, so food was naturally consumed much faster. Half a year. Zhao Yi stood on the city wall and looked into the distance. He murmured, Half a year is enough. Within half a year, even the farthest Feng province would be able to send reinforcements. Victory Province. Located in the hinterland of the capital region and close to the capital, Victory Province was originally one of the top 10 wealthiest provinces in the Qi kingdom. However, since the death of the former emperor half a month ago, the crown prince who was in Victory Province, took over Victory Province and transferred away the garrison troops. Victory Province had undergone earth-shattering changes. Many wealthy families had their properties confiscated, and their properties used to pay for the army. A large number of citizens had been conscripted to become live targets on the battlefield. On the streets of Xingzhou, it was rare to see shops open for business. Most of the people walking on the streets were women. Most of the provinces in the capital region were no different from Victory Province. Victory Province, Provincial Governor's Mansion. In the study, the young man raised his head and looked at a middle-aged man sitting at the head of the table. He said slowly, "Father, we've bet everything on the Crown Prince this time. If the Crown Prince fails, times have changed." The middle-aged man looked at him and said, "When the Crown Prince's troops came to Victory Province, if we didn't agree to his request, would we still be alive?" The young man hesitated for a moment and asked, "But if the third prince gets reinforcements, won't we?" 150,000 troops surrounding the city. The provincial governor of Victory Province shook his head and said, "Reinforcements won't be easy to wait for. I'm afraid they'll be exhausted to death in the capital before reinforcements arrive. The winner takes all. The crown prince has the third prince's throat in a chokehold. He needs to understand the situation." The young man nodded and said, "Father, I understand." Although they had almost submitted to the third prince, they couldn't go against the trend. The crown prince's military might was unstoppable. A wise man submits to circumstances. He walked out of the study and looked in a certain direction in the back residence. A smile appeared on his face and he strolled over. In a remote courtyard in the provincial governor's mansion of Victory Province, Lin Yong had a worried expression as he paced in the courtyard. Finally, he couldn't help but walk up to Lin Wanru and say, "Miss, that ma guy doesn't have good intentions. We can't stay here for long." Lin Wanru shook her head slightly and said, "I'm afraid we can't leave even if we want to now." She naturally knew that the son of the provincial governor of Victory Province didn't have good intentions. However, this was Victory Province, which was already under the control of the first prince. If they were to go out, they would have to face great danger. All of the Qian clan's businesses in Victory Province had already been taken over by the first prince. Presumably, the shops of the Lin family in the other provinces in the capital region wouldn't be spared either. Once their whereabouts were exposed, the first prince would definitely not let her, the person in charge of the Lin family, off. In order to protect her, the guards around her had already been scattered during the refugee tide when the government captured people to join the army. Only Lin Yong and a few others were left by her side. She ran in from outside and said anxiously, "Miss, that ma guy is here again." When Lin Wanru stood up, the sound of footsteps could already be heard from the door. A young man walked in from outside. Looking at her, he said with a smile, "Is Miss Li used to living here?" Lin Wanru nodded and said, "Even if I'm not used to it, it's still much, much better than living outside. Thank you, young Master Ma, for saving me. There's no need to be so courteous between us." Young Master Ma waved his hand and said, "Miss Li, don't worry. In this provincial governor's residence, no one can harm you. If there's anything you need, just say the word. As long as I can do it, I'll do it for you." He smiled and said a few words. Then his tone suddenly changed as he asked, "I wonder if you've considered the matter that I mentioned to Miss Li yesterday?" Lin Wanru looked at him with a troubled expression. "Young Master Ma." The smile on young Master Ma's face faded slightly. Then he smiled again. Looking at her, he said, "When I first met Miss Li, I was shocked and thought that if I could tie the knot with Miss in this life, it would be a great blessing in my life. I'm sincere towards Miss and I hope that Miss can consider it seriously." Lin Wanru smiled apologetically and said, "Marriage is a big matter. It's decided by parents and the words of a matchmaker. How can I be so reckless?" Young Master Ma shook his head and said, "Times have changed. Now the Qi kingdom is in chaos. There are rebels everywhere. Even if I really wanted to invite Mrs. Parents over, not to mention the long journey, the many dangers along the way must not be taken lightly." Lin Wanru fell silent. Young Master Ma smiled and said, "Miss Li, don't be in a hurry to agree. If you don't agree today, I'll ask again tomorrow." This was a naked threat. Lin Yong's breathing was heavy. He rolled up his sleeves and was about to get angry when Lin Wanru suddenly stood up. She looked at young Master Ma and smiled. "It's not that I can't agree to it. In fact, it's not easy to be alone all these years. I've always wanted to find someone to rely on. However, for a woman, marriage is one of the most important things in life. It's already a pity that my parents can't come. But if I don't even inform them, it would be unfilial of me as a daughter. Please forgive me, young Master Ma. What's so difficult about that? Seeing that she had relented, young Master Ma waved his hand and said, "Where are they now? I'll send someone to deliver a letter to them. It won't delay our wedding." Lin Wanru looked up at him and said, "Lu Province." Chapter 1135. When the young master walked out of the small courtyard, there was a faint smile on his face. This girl called Li Ru still couldn't resist the charm of the young master of the provincial governor. Although he already had a few wives and concubines, and among them were young ladies from famous families, famous prostitutes from brothels and clean families, the moment he saw this Miss Li, he knew that she was different from those coquettish cheese who only knew how to fight for a man's favor. The unique temperament she had was something he had never seen before in his life. If he could hold such a girl in his arms, it would probably be the pinnacle of a man's life. He was already a little impatient and he couldn't help but quicken his steps. In the small courtyard, Lin Yong looked at Lin Wanru and said anxiously, "Miss, how can you agree to that guy with the surname Ma? If you marry him, won't you not be able to marry the Li brothers?" This time even Xiao couldn't stand it anymore. She glared at him and said, "Are you stupid? Only when this letter is sent back will he know that we are in the provincial governor's manor. Otherwise, in this vast and chaotic Xing province, where will he go to find us?" Lin Yong scratched his head and said worriedly, "But what if we can't make it in time? We can only do this for now." Lin Wanru sighed. She had traveled all over these years and seen countless people. This young master of the provincial governor seemed to be modest on the surface, but he was actually ruthless on the inside. If she feigned civility with him and pretended to agree first, it would instead delay a little more. If she rejected him with an unyielding attitude, it would instead infuriate him even faster. She looked to the side and said, "Xiao, go and get a brush and ink." Not long later Xiao came over with a brush and paper. She mumbled, "Li, quickly come and save us." The young master held a letter in his hand and casually opened it. After reading it, he nodded in satisfaction. In the end, she didn't play any tricks. This letter was just an ordinary letter from home. The contents of the letter also said that she was about to get married and couldn't invite her parents over. It was an unfilial daughter, and so on. The young master read the letter several times and then put it back. He said to a servant, "Send this letter to Liuzhou as soon as possible. Send my regards to my father-in-law and mother-in-law." "Yes, young master." The servant answered, took the letter and quickly left. The young man walked to the side and impatiently asked an old man, "It's been so long. Are you done with your divination?" It's done. The old man closed the thick book in his hand and hurriedly said, "Young master, I've already matched your and Miss Li's birthdays. The nearest auspicious day is 3 months later." 3 months? Hearing this, the young master frowned and said, 3 months is too long. Is there anyone closer? 1 month at most. I can't wait any longer. 1 month? The old man hesitated for a moment and said, 1 month, yes, but what? But it's not as auspicious as 3 months later. The young master waved his hand and said, "Forget it. 1 month at most. Do as you see fit. If you do well, you'll be rewarded. If not?" He coldly looked at the old man. The old man hurriedly said, "There will be a good auspicious day in 28 days. Don't worry, young master. I'll arrange it properly for you." In the small courtyard, Xiao counted with her fingers. 28 days. It'll take about half a month to get to Liuzhou from here. If it's urgent, it must be urgent. In a house somewhere in Liuzhou. The two masters had been gone for several days. No one supervised his practice. Everyone was packing up. Li Duan walked back and forth in the yard looking a little bored. Even Li Mu was packing up his small bag. Li Duan had nothing to pack. After practicing for a while, he became even more bored. He looked in a certain direction, hesitated for a moment and then walked over. His aunt hadn't spanked him for a long time. Li Duan was a little less afraid of her. He walked over, looked up and asked in a low voice, "Aunt, we're going back soon. Where are Dad and Master?" Rui looked at him and said, "They went to pick up Aunt Wanru." Li Duan asked Fang several times when he would call Aunt Lin mother, but Uncle Fang always said it was not the right time. Now they were going back. Dad should be picking up Aunt Wanru and going back together. He felt the time was right. Fong and his father left together. Li Duan had no one to ask, so he looked up at Mississippi Lu and asked, "Aunt, now that Aunt Wanru is back, will I call her mother?" Mississippi Lu raised her eyebrows, looked down at him and asked, "Who told you?" "That's what Uncle Fong said." Li Duan thought for a moment and said, "Uncle Fong used to say it was not the right time to call Aunt Wanru. Is it the right time now?" "I don't know." Mississippi Lu shook her head. Even she didn't hear the annoyance in her voice. Li Duan said, "Oh." Even his aunt didn't know. But even if his aunt didn't know Aunt Wanru, she should know herself, right? So he raised his head and asked again, "Then when is the right time for me to call her mother? Why don't I call her mother instead?" He thought for a moment and added, "If I call you mother, will you still spank me? My mother, second mother and third mother don't spank me." When Li Duan realized that the atmosphere was not right, he turned around and ran outside. Every time he felt the temperature around his aunt start to turn cold, it meant that his butt was going to be in trouble. However, just like before, he still didn't run away. But there was something different this time. This time, when the slap landed on his butt, it didn't hurt, unlike when he was naughty and crying. Mississippi. Lu looked at him and asked with a frown, "Who taught you these words?" "No one taught me." Since his butt didn't hurt, Li Duan had the courage to say what was on his mind. He pulled up his pants and said, "I just want Aunt to become mother too so that our family can be together forever." Li Duan patted his butt and left. Although the doubts in his heart hadn't been solved, he found a shortcut that wouldn't involve him being spanked. Bai Su walked in from outside and patted his head. Then, he walked to the side of the second young lady Lu and handed her a letter. He said, "Alliance Master, there is a strange letter." "Strange?" Bai Su nodded and said, "The person who delivered the letter said that it was from a lady named Li Ru, but we don't have a lady named Li Ru here." There was an address on the back of the letter. Mississippi Lu took a look and found that the address was correct. "Li Ru?" She murmured and opened the letter. It was an ordinary letter from home. It said that this lady named Li Ru had met a man she liked in Xingzhou and was going to get married in a month. Now that the Qi kingdom was at war, she couldn't bring her parents with her, so she wrote this letter. She didn't know this lady named Li Ru, but she knew the handwriting of this letter. It couldn't be more familiar. The person who first taught her how to read was not Li Yi but Lin Wanru. It started from the sentence, "Suddenly looking back, that person is in the dim light." The letter said that she was in Xingzhou and was going to marry the son of the provincial governor of Xingzhou. The date of this letter was only 5 days after the last one when they were trapped in Xingzhou. This was a letter asking for help. They had entered the provincial governor's office not long after they were trapped in Xingzhou. But 4 days ago Li Yi and Changda Su had already set off for Xingzhou. They still didn't know about this. They didn't know that Lin Wanru was in the provincial governor's office, and that she was going to be forced to marry the son of the provincial governor of Xingzhou in less than half a month. If they couldn't find her when they arrived in Xingzhou, a few more days of delay would cause irreversible consequences. Bai Su's expression was a little anxious. He said, "Chief, I'll go chase after them. I must tell him about this." Mississippi Lu put the letter away and picked up Autumn Water. She said, "You go back to Xingzhou with them first. I'll go personally." Chapter 1136. The Qi Kingdom was once the most powerful country in this land. The country was prosperous and its people were at peace. The rivers were clear and the seas were calm. Its military prowess intimidated its neighbors. However, that was in the past. Several years ago, the Jing Kingdom rose at an unstoppable speed and left the surrounding countries far behind. The Qi Kingdom was prosperous and its people were at peace. The Qi Kingdom was at war. The glorious history of the Qi Kingdom became a thing of the past. Of course, that was only in comparison to the dazzling Jing Kingdom. In fact, other than being unable to catch up to the Jing Kingdom, the Qi Kingdom was still powerful. It was much more powerful than the Wu Kingdom and the Zhao Kingdom. However, even this had changed not long ago. The development of the entire matter could be said to be full of twists and turns. The emperor suddenly passed away. The crown prince happened to be away from the capital. The third prince took the opportunity to launch a coup and seize the capital. Then the crown prince came back from the brink of death. In an extremely short period of time, he took control of all the military forces in the capital region. He was in a stalemate with the third prince for more than a month now. In order to conquer the capital as quickly as possible, the crown prince used almost all the resources and power in the capital region. He disregarded the consequences. In order to gather enough money, countless rich and powerful families had their properties confiscated. No one knew how many commoners were mobilized. At that time there were countless refugees. In order to prevent the loss of population, many states in the capital region even sealed the city gates and forbade anyone from entering or leaving. Although this policy had been loosened, one still had to go through strict checks when entering or leaving the city. "Hey, you guys, stop right there." When the guards saw someone come in, they immediately shouted and quickly walked over. In recent days, most of the people entering and leaving the city were refugees. It was rare to see such well-dressed people. Naturally, they had to be more careful. In this group of 6, 3 were white-haired elders. The other 3 were a burly man, a young man, and a young man. This was a rather strange combination. The guard took a look and quickly waved his hand, saying, "Let's go, let's go." Although these people did not look like refugees, they did not carry any weapons. They were also not the important people that the first prince had asked them to check. There was nothing to check. As long as the spies on the third prince's side were not released, they would not receive much punishment. Li Yi and the others walked into the city, planning to find a place to settle down. This was the capital of Xingzhou. It was where they were when he received Lin Wanru's last letter. The city of Xingzhou wasn't big. It couldn't be compared to the big cities in the future, but it was bigger than the counties in the future. Even so, it wasn't easy for them to find them in the city. After all, this was not the capital, nor was it Shuzhou, nor was it Rui. This was an area occupied by the Qi kingdom. They did not have any influence here. It was not an easy task to find a few people. Su Jing walked around the street, and when he came back he said, "I found a few strongholds of the holy religion, but this place is very close to the capital, so it's not easy to get in touch with them just in case." Li nodded and said, "Don't act rashly for the time being." In addition to Chang, Su and Tian, Fang and Su Jing also came on this trip. Fang had nothing to do and Su Jing had something important to do. Finding Wanru was the most important thing, and if possible he wanted to establish the holy religion. Of course they couldn't act rashly now. This place was close to the headquarters of the holy religion, and it was in someone else's territory. If Taoist none found out, it would be a little troublesome even if they had 3 grandmasters. After all, even a grandmaster couldn't fight against so many people. If they really surrounded the city with tens of thousands of soldiers, even a grandmaster couldn't do anything, although the possibility was very small. In Xingzhou, several shops of the Qian family had been closed and even sealed. The Qian god of fortune was Zhao Yi's #1 henchman. If Zhao Jing got the chance, he would naturally not let the Qian family go. The Lin family's business had not had time to expand to Xingzhou, but looking at the fate of the Qian family, even if the Lin family had a shop in Xingzhou, it would be difficult to find them. Almost all the clues were cut off. Li Yi also thought of putting up a notice, but this was Xingzhou, and the Lin family had long been labeled as King Feng. This would be too ostentatious, so he immediately ruled it out. "If you can't find her, let her come out to find you. Do you really need to make it so difficult?" Chang's voice was always so gloomy. Fang said in surprise, "We don't even know where Miss Lin is. How can we let her come out on her own?" Changde looked at him and said, "If we strip you naked and hang you on the city wall, everyone in Xingzhou will know. If Miss Lin sees you, she will know that we have arrived." Fang silently hid a little further away. This old man could not win in a fight, nor could he win in an argument. It was best to hide a little. He remembered that the son-in-law had said before that people who were physically handicapped would often be mentally handicapped. It seemed that it was true today. He turned to look at Li Yi and said, "Son-in-law, I think it is better for us to take our time to think about it. The longer we delay, the better." Li Yi shook his head and said, "I think there is some truth in what Chief Steward Chang said." Fang looked at him and moved to the side. What Chang said made sense. Naturally, it was not to strip Fang naked and hang him on the city wall. It was the most time-consuming and laborious way to find him, and the efficiency was the worst. Only by breaking the rules could it be effective. In this Xingzhou, the one with the greatest authority and the greatest influence naturally belonged to the provincial governor of Xingzhou. Once he became the provincial governor of Xingzhou, the remaining work would be easy to carry out. Fang stood on the street and stopped a passerby who was hurrying by. He asked, "May I ask how to get to the provincial governor's manor?" That person looked at him and asked, "Are you also going to attend the wedding banquet of the young master of the provincial governor?" "Wedding banquet?" Fang started and asked, "What wedding banquet?" A moment later, Fang walked back again and said, "Son-in-law, the provincial governor's manor is holding some kind of wedding banquet tonight. It's said that the young master of the family of the provincial governor of Xingzhou is going to marry some number of concubines. Should we go and join in the fun?" Li thought for a moment. Today they were going to the provincial governor's manor of Xingzhou to cause trouble. Picking an auspicious day for the wedding of the son of the provincial governor to cause trouble, wasn't this a little too much? This provincial governor is really not a good person. What time is it now, and he's still using the excuse of marrying a concubine to extort the wealth of the people. The commoners outside are very resentful. Fang had an indignant expression and said, "It's said that the son of the provincial governor of Xingzhou has already married 7 concubines. Li suddenly felt that it wasn't too much. He thought for a moment and said, "Let's do it tonight." Today was an auspicious day. The son of provincial governor Ma was going to marry his 8th concubine today. Of course, it was an auspicious day for the Ma residents, but it wasn't for the commoners of Xingzhou. Every time the son of the provincial governor married a concubine, they would have to pay a tax for this reason. In the past it was still fine. It was a good year and they could still endure such a tax every year. But not long ago they had already been extorted by the crown prince. If they were extorted by provincial governor Ma again, they would be a little tight on money. However, in the current Xingzhou, the words of provincial governor Ma were like the imperial edict. Those who listened could still live, but those who didn't would only have a path to death. The commoners secretly complained about this, but on the surface, they didn't dare to say anything even though they were angry. At the city gate, a few soldiers guarding the city were leaning on the city wall. One of them looked at the sky and said, "Tonight is a big banquet at the provincial governor's manor. If we close the city gates earlier we might be able to get a bowl of wine to drink." Extremely right, extremely right. It's not common to see a banquet at the provincial governor's manor. Although we can't sit at the table, we can still stand outside and drink a mouthful of wine. Why don't we close the city gates earlier? His words received the unanimous approval of the people around him. The young master of the provincial governor was marrying a concubine. Although the etiquette wasn't very complicated, and there was no need to bow to the heavens and the earth, the banquet wasn't shabby at all. Even if they passed by the entrance of the provincial governor's manor and said a few auspicious words, they would still be able to get some wine to drink. The few of them discussed for a while and decided to close the city gates earlier. However, when the city gates were closed halfway, they suddenly heard the hurried sounds of horse hooves in front of them. The few of them raised their heads and saw a huge horse charging over. The 3 of them were so scared that they lost their spirit and hurriedly dodged. That steed brushed past them and disappeared into the city. Only then did the few of them regain their senses. They cursed loudly, "Which idiot is it?" That person had already disappeared. The few of them cursed and closed the city gates again. At this moment in Xingzhou City, a white-robed female stopped a passerby and asked, "How do I get to the provincial governor's manor?" You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.